Chapter 184. The one-star martial saint with the bow had a look of disbelief on his face. He had never expected that as a first-level celestial vortex realm martial saint, he would be killed by Yi Xing, a half-step martial saint, with 2 arrows. The other 2 martial saints who were fighting with old Heir were also shocked, their faces filled with shock. A half-step martial saint had killed a martial saint. What kind of archery was this? Although Lao He's strength was weaker than that of a 2-star martial saint, under the pincer attack of 2 martial sages, he was still at a disadvantage. However, the death of the martial saint with the bow shocked the other 2 martial saints. They panicked and saved Lao He from his predicament. Lao He let out a sharp cry and flapped his wings. The wind was like a blade as he attacked the 2 martial saints with short swords. Yi Xing, who was far away, had already knocked an arrow on his bow and aimed at the other 1-star martial saint. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the arrow left the bow and pierced through the air. The 1-star martial saint was facing Lao He's counterattack and was on guard. How could he block Yi Xing's arrow? He also did not expect Yi Xing to shoot such an arrow so quickly. By the time the 1-star martial saint reacted, it was already too late. The arrow was like a ray of light and instantly shot into his back. The tip of the arrow came out from his chest and pierced through his chest, piercing through his heart. Even though he was a martial saint, he died instantly. In the past, martial saints were unreachable existences to Yi Xing. Now, Yi Xing's arrow already had the power to kill a martial saint. Unknowingly, Yi Xing had already become an expert whose strength was equivalent to that of a martial saint. The 2 1-star martial saints were killed by Yi Xing one after another. The remaining 2-star martial saint was scared out of his wits. He was already no match for Lao He alone. In addition, Yi Xing was shooting arrows from afar. It was a fatal situation. If he continued to fight with Lao He, he would inevitably be killed by Yi Xing. However, it was impossible for him to escape from the black-feathered eagle. Hence he made his decision. The 2-star martial saint fiercely attacked Lao He with 2 moves, both of which were ultimate moves, forcing Lao He to retreat for a moment. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the 2-star martial sage instantly poured out a mouthful of celestial essence and rushed towards Yi Xing. At the same time, the void above him changed, and an ordinary barren star appeared above him. Astral energy gushed out from the constellations manifested by Qin Wentian's constellation. Instantly, the strength of the 2-star martial saint skyrocketed, and his speed also increased by a notch. In the blink of an eye, he was 200 to 300 meters away. His figure was like an arrow. The 2-star martial sage's goal was very clear. Even if he died, he would drag Yi Xing down with him. Lao He screeched, flapped his wings, and immediately chased after the 2-star martial sage. Unfortunately, the 2-star martial sage rushed towards Yi Xing with all his might. He even used the power of Qin Wentian's constellation. Even though Lao He was faster, he could not catch up with him. With the speed of a 2-star martial sage, he could reach Yi Xing in a few breaths' time. With his strength, wouldn't it be easy for him to kill a half-step martial sage? Yi Xing's expression turned serious. In an instant, he took out 3 blue sandalwood arrows. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. He used the stacking wave arrow art and shot out 3 arrows in succession. The 2-star martial sage did not slow down. The short blade in his hand shone brightly, and he slashed at the arrows furiously. Cha, cha. Ding. 3 sounds rang out in succession. The first 2 arrows were directly split in half by the 2-star martial sage. However, when he slashed at the 3rd arrow, the star essence in his body could not continue operating. His strength weakened and he failed to split it open. The short blade collided with the arrowhead, and sparks flew. The terrifying power suddenly stopped the 2-star martial sage's speed. At this critical moment, if he slowed down, he would be in fatal danger. In the blink of an eye, Lao He rushed up from hundreds of meters behind him. His huge sharp claws, like spiritual weapons, grabbed the 2-star martial sage's body from behind. In an instant, the defense of the 2-star martial sage's star essence was broken. The sharp claws pierced directly into the 2-star martial sage's back. At this time, the 2-star martial sage was only a few hundred meters away from Yi Xing. He could reach Yi Xing in 1 or 2 breaths. Unfortunately, he was stopped by Yi Xing's 3 arrows. His body stopped and he died under Lao He's sharp claws. The 3 men in black were all dead. Lao He swung his claws and threw away the two-star martial sage's body. With a flap of his wings, he arrived in front of Yixing and lowered his head to Yixing. Chu Jingyue, who was following behind, was petrified. These were 3 martial sages. How could they die just like that? Yixing patted Lao He's head. His eyes fell on the bodies of the 3 men in black. He was also very surprised. He did not know why these martial sages in black were chasing after him. It was illogical to say that the Zhen prison temple had hired them. Since they had hired assassins, it was impossible for them to make the first move. It was completely superfluous. Yixing thought about it. His only enemy was the Zhen prison temple. As for the Dongfu nation, although he had killed many people from the Dongfu nation on the battlefield, he was just a junior. He had only killed some star-tempering realm warriors in the country war. He should not be valued by the Dongfu sect. Moreover, the Dongfu nation could not reach into the Falling Star Kingdom. Therefore, Yixing ruled out his hatred. After thinking about it, he decided to blame his master, Xianxia. Xianxia had an enemy in the Falling Star sect. It was the sect elder, Hua Tianshu, who was also the sect master's wife. The disciples who entered the Falling Star sect from the Zishan prefecture would be suppressed by Hua Tianshu. However, Yixing had risen in the Falling Star sect so quickly that no one had the chance to suppress him. Moreover, Yixing had become the top outer disciple in just over a month. Almost everyone could see that Yixing had great potential. Hua Tianshu definitely did not want him to grow. Therefore, it was very possible that she had killed Yixing while Yixing was away from the Falling Star sect. Yixing's guess was very logical. Moreover, he had accepted it in his heart and determined that the mastermind was Hua Tianshu. However, there was one thing that he had guessed wrong. He had thought that the people he had killed in the Eastern Mountain City Country War were not important and would not be valued by the Falling Star sect. This was because only martial saints were important to the Falling Star sect. However, there was indeed an important person among the people he had killed in the Falling Star sect. It was the 3rd young master Jin, a direct descendant of the Falling Star sect and the grandson of the Falling Star sect master. Yixing had killed the grandson of the Falling Star sect master. How could he not be valued by the Falling Star sect? He had already been blacklisted by the Falling Star sect. Who are these people? Senior brother Yi, why do they want to kill you? Chu Jingyue asked in shock as she came back to her senses from her petrified state. Yixing had already taken off the masks of the black-robed men. He did not recognize any of them, but he had already activated a recording array formation. The figures of the 3 black-robed men were all recorded by him. Perhaps there would be others who would recognize these 3 people. Yixing searched the bodies of the 3 men and found a total of dozens of lower-grade star crystals. Other than that, there was nothing else. As for the spiritual bow and the 2 spiritual short blades, Yixing naturally kept them. Yixing wanted to have a spiritual bow. He wanted a spirit weapon bow, and this spirit pattern bow was just right. As for the other 2 spirit weapons, he kept one for himself and gave the other to Chu Jingyue. Among the outer disciples, only Xianxia Yuan had a spiritual weapon. From now on, Yixing and Chu Jingyue were also part of the clan that had spiritual weapons. If the outer disciples knew about this, who knew how many of them would die? Junior sister Chu, get off the horse. We don't need to ride horses anymore. We can ride eagles. Yixing put the spiritual bow and short blades into his storage ring. He waved to Chu Jingyue and then jumped onto Lao Hei's back. Lao Hei's flying speed was much faster than a demonic horse. It could travel 10,000 miles in a day. Chu Jingyue also jumped onto Lao Hei's back. Yixing patted Lao Hei. Up. Whoosh! Lao Hei flapped its wings and rushed towards the sky. Soon, it was high up in the sky. If it was an untamed flying beast, it would be impossible for a person to stand on its back. Especially a martial sage-level flying beast, the hurricane generated by its speed could blow a person off. However, a tamed flying beast was different. It would use demonic vitality to defend itself and slow down the speed of the airflow. It would make a person feel like a gentle breeze. It wouldn't be uncomfortable and wouldn't be blown off. Chu Jingyue stood on Lao Hei's back. At first, she was a little nervous. As time passed, she gradually relaxed. Standing on Lao Hei's back was indeed very stable. In the end, Chu Jingyue completely relaxed. She looked around and opened her arms. She felt relaxed and happy. Wow! This is my first time riding a martial sage-level flying beast. It's so fast. Chu Jingyue was in a good mood. She cheered. It feels so good to look down at the earth from a high place. Yi Xing looked around and also felt relaxed. He said, "It would feel even better if I could fly on my own." Chu Jingyue said longingly, "Yes, it would be great if I could fly on my own. Unfortunately, humans don't have wings. It's too difficult to fly." Although martial sages can use their celestial vitality to condense the wings of flying beasts and glide in the air, they can only glide for a distance of a few hundred meters. It can't be considered flying. Although enlightened masters can fly a little further, they are still gliding in the air. After a while, they need to land to breathe. I heard that only after becoming a venerable can one truly fly in the air. It's too far away. Yi Xing was speechless. Venerable was indeed far away. It was an expert that didn't exist in the entire True Xian domain. Half a day later, Lao He arrived at Zishan County City and flew directly into the Marquis Mansion. Originally, Yi Xing planned to ride the demonic horse directly to the Blue Cloud Mountain Range. However, now that Lao He was on the way, Yi Xing naturally wanted to visit his master, Xianxia. And he also had something to ask. Chu Jingyue and Lao He waited in a courtyard of the Marquis Mansion. Yi Xing went directly to the back hall of the Marquis Mansion to visit Xianxia. After seeing Xianxia and bowing, Yi Xing told him about the attack on his trip. He also took out the recording array that recorded the figures of the 3 black-clothed men and showed it to Xianxia. After Xianxia saw it, Yi Xing asked, "Master, do you recognize them?" Chapter 185. Xianxia shook his head and said, "Since she wanted to kill you in such a way, she definitely would not leave any evidence behind. Fortunately, I had already expected that as soon as you left the mountain, she would make a move on you. I sent the black-feathered eagle to wait near the and it was indeed useful." Yi Xing said, "She did not know that I was Master's disciple. Just because I was born in the Zishan County, she wanted to kill me. This is too vicious." Xianxia walked in front of Yi Xing, patted Yi Xing's shoulder and said, "This is because your performance was too outstanding. I know everything about you in the sect. Although Master knew that you would rise in the outer court, I did not expect that you would rise so quickly. If you were mediocre, she would not have to kill you." Xianxia stopped talking, removed his palm, and slowly walked to the side. After a while he continued, "When you won first place in the outer court, I knew that you would definitely go down the mountain to look for opportunities to break through the star vortex. Since you were so outstanding, you would definitely arouse her killing intent, so I sent the black-feathered eagle." Yi Xing said, "Fortunately, Master's prediction was accurate. Otherwise, this disciple would be in big trouble. I am confident that I can kill 2 one-star martial saints, but 2-star martial saints, even with a bow and arrow, it would be difficult to deal with them." Xianxia smiled indifferently and asked, "How much of your celestial essence has been converted? How much has your overlapping waves archery technique reached?" Yi Xing said truthfully, 20%, 14 overlapping waves archery technique. Xianxia was surprised. 20% of your celestial essence reached 14 overlapping waves archery technique? What kind of inheritance did you learn? Yi Xing said, "Pure essence art." "Pure essence art? You practiced the pure essence art?" Xianxia suddenly exclaimed. The Falling Star Sect's pure essence art was an inheritance that no one had succeeded in practicing for more than 100 years after Lin Shuyuan. Yi Xing smiled and nodded. Although he was not proud of it, he was certainly happy in his heart. Xianxia was surprised for a moment, but he soon returned to normal and said, "That's right, with your martial arts talent, it is even above Ancestor Lin's. If you can't cultivate the pure Yuan technique, then no one can. You cultivate the pure Yuan technique. No wonder you can achieve the 14-layered stacks with just 20% of your celestial essence." Xianxia then changed the topic. "However, your fate is very low. If you want to become a martial saint, it will be very difficult. You will need to rely on some opportunities and good fortune. However, the opportunity to become a martial saint can only be found by chance. It will depend on your own luck. Where do you plan to go?" Yi Xing said, "I've heard that Kuan Yuan mountain range is rich in top-grade herbs and even spiritual herbs. I've decided to pay a visit to Kuan mountain range to cultivate my invincible golden body to the complete realm. As for whether I'll have the opportunity to become a martial sage, I'll leave it to fate. Kuan mountain range was a branch of the Green Cloud mountain range. It was located in the depths of the Green Cloud mountain range. It was the territory of high-level vicious beasts. Occasionally, there would even be level 2 demonic beasts. Xianxia nodded. With your strength, it won't be a problem for you to explore Kuan mountain range. However, Kuan mountain range is closer to the east supporting country than the falling star country. Most of the martial artists who explore Kuan mountain range are from the east supporting country. You have to be careful. If you meet others, don't expose your identity. I understand. When Yixing learned about Kuan mountain range, he naturally knew that it was closer to the east supporting country. If his identity was exposed, he would be in great danger. Xianxia said, I know your ambition. This time, if you don't become a martial saint, you won't return. I don't know how long you'll be traveling. Take the black-feathered eagle with you. It will follow you from now on. In addition, I'll teach you the cultivation method of the Azure Cloud pupils. Listen carefully, it will greatly increase your chances of survival in the demonic beast world. The Azure Cloud pupils not only allowed one to see far, it also had the effect of mind control. The subjective consciousness of demonic beasts was far inferior to that of humans. It was difficult for martial artists to control their minds, but it was much easier for demonic beasts. In the Azure Cloud Mountains, one would definitely have to deal with demonic beasts. Being able to see far and control their minds would naturally increase one's chances of survival. Finishing his words, Xianxia told Yixing about the Eye of the Azure Cloud that he had yet to teach him. Yixing listened attentively, memorizing everything in his mind. Have you memorized it? Xianxia asked after he finished. Yixing nodded. I've memorized it. The stacking wave arrow technique is enough for you for now. As for the Lingwu arrow technique, I'll teach you when you become a martial saint. Xianxia waved his hand. You can go now. I hope you can break through the star vortex soon and become a martial saint. After leaving the Xianxia palace, Yixing and Chu Jingyue continued to ride on Old Black and flew towards the Kunyan mountain range. Zishan County was beside the Azure Cloud Mountains, but it was still a few thousand miles away from the Kunyan mountain range. The Kunyan mountain range was only 1,000 miles away from the Dongfu country. Therefore, most of the time, the Kunyan mountain range was frequented by martial artists from the Dongfu country. However, it could not be ruled out that there were martial artists from the Luoxing country or even the ancient Bloody country. This was because the ancient Bloody country was about the same as the Luoxing country from the Kunyan mountain range. As a martial saint-level demonic beast, Old Black flew from the Zishan County to the Kunyan mountain range. Ordinary demonic beasts were known as level 1 demonic beasts. Only at the Kunyan mountain range would level 2 demonic beasts appear. Old Black was almost invincible. Naturally, it could fly without any obstacles. As dusk approached, they arrived at the Kunyan mountain range. The sky was getting dark. The two dug a cave on a mountain peak and prepared to spend the night. Old Black rested outside the cave. As a martial saint-level demonic beast, the nearby high-level demonic beasts would avoid it when they smelled its scent. It would be quiet at night. In the cave, Chu Jingyue felt a little uncomfortable. She had never spent the night in the same room with a man in her life. Although she and Yixing were not in the same room, they were in the same cave. The cave was dug out and the space was not big. It was much smaller than a room. It was even more awkward than being in the same room. Chu Jingyue secretly had feelings for him. Obviously, she had more concerns about the feelings between men and women. I will cultivate at night. You can rest as much as you want. I won't disturb you. Yixing, on the other hand, did not feel awkward at all. After instructing Chu Jingyue, he closed his eyes and sat down to cultivate the pure Yuan technique. He had already eaten the 30 Supreme Grade Star accumulation pills as a reward for becoming the top disciple in the outer sect. However, he had not had time to refine them all. There was still a lot of medicinal power left in his body that he needed to absorb. After seeing Yixing enter the cave, he started to cultivate. Chu Jingyue looked at Yixing for a while and felt less awkward. It was boring to stay in the cave and Chu Jingyue did not want to go to bed too early. After a while, she ate a Supreme Grade Star accumulation pill and also started to cultivate. Her physique leaned towards water. The spiritual martial arts inheritance that she cultivated was the water attribute inheritance, all water technique. Her cultivation was twice the result with half the effort. Both of them cultivated until late at night and went to sleep. That night, both of them had a dream. Yi Xingming thought about how she had become a martial sage and continued to train. Her cultivation continued to advance rapidly. Later on, she became an enlightened being, and in the end, an exalted. With her own strength, she was able to soar in the sky. She was extremely happy. Suddenly, there was another person flying beside Yi Xing. Yi Xing looked over and saw that it was Wei Qingxian. She had also become a venerable and was flying in the sky. The two of them smiled at each other and held hands. Mountains, lakes, and pieces of land flew under the two of them. They were holding hands with smiles on their faces. They were extremely happy. They kept flying like this. Chu Jingyue, on the other hand, dreamed that it was the same as during the day. She and Yi Xing were flying in the sky. However, it was not Lao Hei who was flying them, but a larger bird. This bird was many times larger than Lao Hei. Its back was almost like a small square. She and Yi Xing were stable on it and could even run on it. However, all of a sudden, the birds below them disappeared for some reason. She and Yi Xing both fell from an extremely high altitude. The feeling of weightlessness from falling from a high altitude instantly filled her whole body and even her thoughts. Only falling was left in her dream. She waved her hands, trying to grab onto something to stop her body from falling. Suddenly, it was as if she had grabbed onto a pillar. Finally, the feeling of weightlessness eased a little, and she felt a little more grounded. Thus, she hugged the pillar tightly and refused to let go. Early morning. Yi Xing woke up with a faint smile on his face. The dream of flying in the sky with Wei Qingxian last night made him very happy. Although he had woken up, Yi Xing still remembered the dream from last night. Why do my thighs feel a little tight and heavy? Yi Xing suddenly opened his eyes and moved his legs at the same time. As soon as he opened his eyes, Yi Xing was shocked. It turned out that Chu Jingyue's hands were hugging his thighs and her whole body was lying on his lap. As soon as he moved his legs, he felt 2 lumps of soft flesh. He looked at Chu Jingyue's position and saw that her head was almost between his legs. The lumps on his legs were her breasts. No wonder the 2 lumps of soft flesh were so obvious. Chu Jingyue's breasts were very plump. Yi Xing did not dare to look directly at this scene. Yi Xing glanced around and saw that he was originally sleeping on the right side of the cave. For some reason, he was now in the middle of the cave. Chu Jingyue was supposed to sleep on the left side of the cave, but she had also rolled to the middle. No wonder the two of them slept together. This surprised Yi Xing. If Chu Jingyue hugged his thighs at night, he should have woken up, right? Presumably, Lao Hei was guarding outside the cave. Yi Xing was not on guard and slept very deeply last night. He was also having a beautiful dream. Perhaps because of these reasons, he moved to a different place and did not wake up when he bumped into Chu Jingyue. Yi Xing could only guess so. Recalling that he seemed to be flying in the sky hand in hand with Wei Qingxian last night, Yi Xing immediately saw and felt his own hands. It was not hand in hand with Wei Qingxian. It turned out that his left and right hands were tightly interlocked. Sweat. At this moment, as Yi Xing moved, Chu Jingyue let out a soft cry. She was obviously about to wake up. What was the current situation? Yi Xing could not explain and quickly pretended to be asleep. When Yi Xing closed his eyes and did not move, Chu Jingyue quickly opened her eyes and found herself hugging Yi Xing's thighs. Her heart skipped a beat and she was shocked. Chapter 186. Chu Jingyue had never spent the night in the same room with a man. Not to mention, she was now hugging Yi Xing's thigh in such a shameful posture. It really made her break out in a cold sweat. Chu Jingyue almost exclaimed, but she held back because she saw that Yi Xing had not woken up yet. This allowed Chu Jingyue's flustered heart to calm down a little. Fortunately, senior brother Yi has not woken up yet and did not see the current situation. Otherwise, how could I see him? Chu Jingyue muttered in her heart. She quickly let go of Yi Xing's thigh and stood up. Seeing that Yi Xing still had not woken up, Chu Jingyue let out a long sigh and walked out of the cave. Yi Xing heard that Chu Jingyue had left the cave, but he was not in a hurry to open his eyes. Chu Jingyue must be a little flustered now. If she saw him wake up, she would be embarrassed. Chu Jingyue secretly observed Yi Xing several times outside the cave to see if he was really asleep. After a full quarter of an hour, Yi Xing showed no signs of waking up, which made Chu Jingyue completely relax. In her opinion, Yi Xing really did not know. If he was pretending to be asleep, he would not have pretended for so long. After half an hour, Yi Xing opened his eyes and woke up. He pretended to have just woken up and looked at his position to express his surprise. Then, he saw Chu Jingyue outside the cave. "Junior sister Chu, you woke up so early." Yi Xing smiled at Chu Jingyue. Chu Jingyue's face heated up, but she thought that Yi Xing did not know that she had hugged his thigh to sleep last night. She calmed down after a slight confusion. Chu Jingyue said, "I just woke up not long ago. It's really safe with Lao Hei guarding. This is deep in the Mount Qingyun. There is no sound of evil beasts at night. It's very quiet." Yi Xing walked out of the cave and patted Lao Hei next to him. He looked into the distance and said, "From today onwards, we will start looking for medicinal herbs." After a night's rest, Old Black's exhaustion from yesterday's flight had long disappeared. He was full of energy and let out a loud whimper. Yi Xing and Chu Jingyue both had a faint smile on their faces. They were both hiding a secret in their hearts. The awkwardness was quickly digested by Yi Xing. Compared to ordinary materials, the number of top-grade medicinal herbs was extremely rare. Even experienced herb gatherers would have a hard time finding them. However, this was not a problem for Yi Xing. Yi Xing and Chu Jingyue rode Old Hay and flew in the air. Yi Xing looked into the distance and observed the surroundings. Whenever he saw deep valleys, streams, ponds, and other precious places that were very suitable for growing materials, he would let Blackie fly over and Yi Xing would search carefully. Yi Xing's search was not just a matter of observing with his eyes. He also had his superbrain scanning. Even if it was in a crack in a rock, under a pool, in a valley, and other places that could not be seen with his eyes, Yi Xing could still use his superbrain to scan and search. This was something that even Zishan Ho, who had cultivated the eyes of clear cloud, could not do. The eyes of clear cloud could be used to look into the distance and control the mind. However, it could not see through objects or scan places that could not be seen with one's eyes. Therefore, even if the number of top-grade medicinal herbs was very rare, Yi Xing's harvest was not small after a day of searching. Somewhere in a deep valley, Yi Xing stood in front of a fist-wide crack in a rock and used his spiritual weapon to split open some rocks. Then, deep in the crack, he pulled out 3 stalks of top-grade blood spirit grass. It was a type of medicinal herb that greatly replenished qi and blood. "You can even find this?" Chu Jingyue was extremely speechless. Deep in the crack, one could not see with their eyes at all. Who would have thought that there would be blood spirit grass? Moreover, there were 3 stalks growing? Somewhere in a deep valley. The water rushed down from a high place. The rocks below were washed by the water and countless gullies and cracks were formed. Some of the cracks were so deep that one could not see the bottom. Yi Xing stood on a large rock under the water and observed for a while. Then, he held his spiritual weapon and chopped at a pile of rocks. After moving the broken rocks away, there were several stalks of top-grade spirit recovering grass growing in the crack below. Yi Xing reached out and picked all of them. Chu Jingyue, who was at the side, was dumbfounded. How could he find this? Beside a pool. There were some footprints beside the pool. Some belonged to demonic beasts and some belonged to humans. Generally, there were many medicinal herbs in places with water. This pool was obviously frequented by people. Some wandering martial artists or experienced herb gatherers would definitely search carefully when they came here. Chu Jingyue said, "Brother Yi Xing, people often come here. If there were any medicinal herbs, they would have been picked long ago." Yi Xing smiled faintly. That's not necessarily the case. There are always places that are overlooked. As he spoke, he squatted down and brushed aside a bunch of weeds beside the pool. Then, he dug up the soil and dug out a few red roots that were shaped like dragons. It was the top-grade red dragon root, which was also a type of medicinal herb that greatly replenished qi and blood. Chu Jingyue's face was full of surprise. She thought to herself, does his eyes have the ability to see through things? How could he find them so quickly? Thinking of this, Chu Jingyue suddenly grabbed her clothes and felt a little uncomfortable. If he really could see through things, then wouldn't it make no difference whether she wore clothes or not in front of senior brother Yi? Yi Xing saw through Chu Jinghue's thoughts at a glance and said, "Picking medicinal herbs requires skill. You can see what kind of place has medicinal herbs by observing the environment. This is a kind of knowledge. I forgot to tell you that I'm a super skilled herb gatherer." If Chu Jinghue suspected that Yi Xing could see through things, it would make her feel even more uncomfortable than if she knew that he knew that she hugged his leg to sleep at night. Yi Xing obviously wanted to dispel her idea. Besides, Yi Xing had never seen through her. Chu Jinghue was just making a wild guess. Even she did not believe that he could see through things. How could a person see through things? Therefore, after listening to Yi Xing's explanation, Chu Jinghue said in admiration, "Senior brother Ye's herb-picking skills are simply superb. No wonder you're super skilled." With Lao He accompanying them, Yi Xing and Chu Jinghue were almost unimpeded in the Kuan-Yun mountain range. As a level 2 demonic beast, Lao He was comparable to a martial sage. Wherever he stopped, the nearby ferocious beasts would definitely flee at the sight of him. Even if they occasionally encountered level 2 demonic beasts, the ones that appeared in the Kuan-Yun mountain range were only level 2 demonic beasts that were equivalent to a beginner martial sage. Their strength was basically about the same as a 1-star martial sage. There were very few level 2 demonic beasts that were comparable to a 2-star martial sage, so most of them were no match for Lao He. When they saw Lao He, even if they did not run away, they would not take the initiative to attack. Once a level 2 demonic beast took the initiative to attack, Lao He would deal with it. Yi Xing would also help from the side with his bow and arrow, shooting a fatal arrow. There were no obstacles in the Kuan-Yun mountain range. Yi Xing's efficiency in finding spiritual herbs was also very high. Naturally, he had a bountiful harvest. Every day, he only spent most of the day looking for spiritual herbs. The two of them spent the rest of the day and the first half of the night cultivating. Not only did they cultivate the spiritual martial arts legacy, but they also cultivated body-refining cultivation techniques. The task of collecting spiritual herbs was just an excuse for them to leave the sect. Their real purpose was to cultivate body-refining cultivation techniques and look for opportunities to break through the star spirals and become martial sages. Naturally, they would not stop cultivating every day. Especially Yi Xing. He cultivated even later than Chu Jinghue every night. This was because he had to spend more than 2 hours every afternoon learning Array Dao. Yi Xing had memorized the method of setting up the level 2 Array Dao, the coiled snake array. The key was to rely on his own practice to be able to truly use it. Yi Xing spent more than 2 hours learning Array Dao. Naturally, his other cultivation was slower than Chu Jinghue's. However, his daily cultivation was no less than Chu Jinghue's. Therefore, he always slept more than 2 hours later than her. After the embarrassing incident on the first night, the two of them were more careful when they slept. They did not sleep too soundly nor did they roll around. The situation on the first night did not happen again. Time passed day by day. The two of them found more and more spiritual herbs. Their body-refining cultivation techniques improved greatly every day. Their cultivation also gradually increased. Occasionally, the two of them would meet other martial artists. However, with Lao He, a martial sage demonic beast by their side, the other martial artists would stay far away from them. There were no conflicts. Although most of the martial artists in the Kuan-Yun mountain range were from the Dongfu country, Yi Xing did not take the initiative to provoke them. Even if the Dongfu country was an enemy country and Yi Xing hated the people of the Dongfu country, as long as they did not take the initiative to attack, Yi Xing would not take the initiative to kill them. The population of the Dongfu country was not any less than that of the Luoxing country. There were at least 1 billion people. Among them, 40% were martial artists. It was impossible for them to kill the people of the Dongfu country because of the hatred between the countries. If that was the case, even if the 1 billion people of the Dongfu country stood there for Yi Xing to kill, Yi Xing would not be able to kill them all. Furthermore, if Yi Xing were to kill any of the Dongfu country's troops in the Kuan-Yun mountain range, it would definitely attract the attention of more powerful martial artists. In the end, a martial saint, a mid-level martial saint, or even a high-level martial saint would appear. In order to avoid trouble, Yi Xing also wanted to avoid fighting with the martial artists in the Kuan-Yun mountain range. He only wanted to collect herbs in peace, cultivate, and then look for the opportunity to become a martial sage. Half a month later, Yi Xing and Chu Jingyue's body tempering cultivation technique had both reached the perfection realm. The foundation of the star tempering realm had been consolidated to the peak. In the future, when they broke through the star vortex and became martial sages, they would no longer have to worry about their foundation. Moreover, their cultivation had also made great progress after half a month of cultivation. Yi Xing's celestial essence had already transformed by 40%, while Chu Jingyue was a little slower than him, transforming by 20%. As for Yi Xing's array Dao, he had also made great progress. He could now set up 80% to 90% of the coiled snake array. Although the difficulty of setting up the last 20% of the array was the highest, Yi Xing was confident that he would be able to completely master the coiled snake array in about 10 days and become a Grade 2 array master. Yi Xing didn't want to cause trouble, but it didn't mean that trouble wouldn't come to him just because he didn't want to. On the 22nd day after the two arrived at the Kuan-Yun mountain range, a team of martial artists from the Dongfu country encountered Yi Xing and the others. It was a team of 7 people. 2 of them were half-step martial sages and the other 5 were level 9 martial artists. Because of Lao Hei's presence, the team immediately fled when they saw Yi Xing and Chu Jingyue. Thank you for your support. Although I did not see the miracle, I know that you did your best. Thank you. Chapter 187. Was that Yi Xing? Did you see him clearly? One of the half-step martial sages asked after they had reached a safe place. Look carefully, it's Yi Xing. This brat actually came to the Kunyan mountain range. He's simply courting death. Another half-step martial sage said. The 7 of them were Dongfu sect's outer disciples. They had come to Mount Kuan-Yun to train. Yi Xing's name was on the Dongfu sect's blacklist. Naturally, his face was on the blacklist as well. The martial artists from Dongfu country that Yi Xing had met before did not recognize him. However, the 7 of them were Dongfu sect's disciples and they recognized him. It's a pity that he has a black-feathered eagle with him. It's a martial sage demonic bird and it's hard to deal with. Otherwise, we would have killed the couple and done a great service. Since the black-feathered eagle is guarding him, we can't act rashly. Let's send the news back to the sect. It'll take too long to send the news back to the sect. Isn't senior brother Zi Chuanyu's team in Mount Kuan-Yun? They are not far from Mount Kuan-Yun. In their team, there are 2 2-star martial sages and 3 1-star martial sages. Senior brother Zi Chuanyu's strength is comparable to a 3-star martial sage. If we call them over, a black-feathered eagle will be nothing. That's right. Even senior sister Ishii is very powerful among the 2-star martial saints. As long as senior brother Zi Chuanyu restrains Black Feather Eagle, senior sister Ishii will be able to tear the couple into pieces. Alright, let's inform senior brother Zi Chuanyu. The 7 outer disciples discussed and decided not to return to the sect. Instead, they went to look for inner disciple Zi Chuanyu in Mount Kuan-Yun. However, just as they were about to move, a voice came from afar. The few of you actually recognize this Yi and want to invite people over to kill this Yi? The 7 of them were shocked when they heard the voice. They looked over and saw a young man standing on a huge rock on the opposite hill. He was holding a bow and arrow and looking at them. The young man was Yi Xing. When these 7 people saw him, they fled in panic. Yi Xing's eyesight was amazing. He saw their expressions clearly and chased after them. The 7 of them did not see Chu Jingyue and Black Feathered Eagle. When they saw Yi Xing chasing after them alone, they calmed down in an instant. A half-step martial sage shouted, "This brat dares to chase after us alone. Junior brothers, let's kill him." Yi Xing was blacklisted by sect master Watanabe Xiong. If he could kill Yi Xing with his own hands, it would be much more meritorious than sending a message. When the half-step martial sage roared, the 7 of them charged at Yi Xing at the same time. Whoosh! Yi Xing snorted, and the arrow on the bowstring instantly shot out. An arrow that could even kill a martial saint, who below the martial saint realm could block it. The half-step martial sage at the front waved his saber to block the arrow. The saber in his hand broke into 2 pieces with a clang. The arrow continued to shoot forward without slowing down. After it pierced the throat of the half-step martial sage, it shot into the heart of a rank 9 martial artist behind him. The 2 of them fell to the ground instantly, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The other 5 people were dumbfounded. They had never seen such archery skills. They were scared out of their wits. With a scream, they quickly turned around and fled. At the same time, the leading half-step martial sage raised his hand to the sky. With a whoosh, a bright light shot out from his hand and into the sky. The light soared high into the sky, at least 3,000 meters above the ground, before exploding with a bang, forming a huge sunflower pattern. Yi Xing's eyes narrowed. This was obviously a signal flare for the disciples of the Dongfu sect to ask for help. If it exploded in the sky, all the disciples of the Dongfu sect within a few hundred miles would know. Yi Xing immediately pulled out 3 Qinggu arrows and shot them together. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 3 rank 9 martial artists fell to the ground. They were shot in the back and died in one shot. The remaining 2 looked terrified as they ran for their lives. Yi Xing shot 2 more arrows. The rank 9 martial artists were killed in one shot. The half-step martial sage's arrow only pierced the back of his shoulder. It was not a fatal wound. The huge force in the arrow caused the half-step martial sage to fall forward. The tip of the arrow pierced through his body and nailed into a bluestone, rendering him immobile. Yi Xing used the goose cloud flight to chase after the half-step martial sage. Naturally, he had to interrogate him and figure out some things. To the east of the Luoxing country was the Dongfu country. To the west of the Luoxing country was the Lingyu country. The Dongfu country was the enemy of the Dongfu country, while the Lingyu country was the ally of the Luoxing country. The Lingyu country was controlled by the Lingyu sect, which was more powerful than the Luoxing sect. Although there were no 4 stars perfected person in the sect, there were 2 3 stars perfected person in the sect. Among the 6 sects in the south of the Green Cloud Mountain, the Lingyu sect was not the strongest, but it was in the top 3. The Misty Moon Peak of the Lingyu sect was the cultivation place of the inner sect elder, the Misty Moon Peak. The Misty Moon Peak was one of the 5 executive elders of the Lingyu sect. She was not an ordinary inner sect elder and had great power. There were many inner sect disciples who wanted to be her disciple. However, the Misty Moon Peak had not accepted a disciple for more than 10 years. It was only this year that she accepted a personal disciple. Surprisingly, the personal disciple of Master Yenyue was a 14-year-old girl from outside the Spirit Moon sect. She was only at the 8th level of the Star Tempering realm. This caused many of the Spirit Moon sect's inner disciples and core disciples to be incomparably envious, and even jealous. The new personal disciple of the Misty Moon Peak was a mystery to the Lingyu sect disciples. Because the Misty Moon Peak had never allowed her to leave the Misty Moon Peak, none of the Lingyu sect disciples had ever seen her. Even when an elder went to the Misty Moon Peak and saw the personal disciple of the Misty Moon Peak, her face was covered with a veil and no one knew what she looked like. Therefore, in the eyes of the Lingyu sect disciples, she was a mystery. There was even a rumor in the Lingyu sect that she was the illegitimate daughter of the Misty Moon Peak. Of course, this rumor could only be spread in private. No one dared to say it in public. Otherwise, if they angered the Misty Moon Peak, one of the 5 executive elders, the consequences would be severe. The Lingyu sect disciples only knew that the Misty Moon Peak's personal disciple was her illegitimate daughter. However, they did not know that this personal disciple was about to break through the Star Vortex realm and become a martial saint after only 4 months of entering the sect. On the Misty Moon Peak, Wei Qingxian sat with her eyes closed. She looked solemn as she tried to break through to the Star Vortex realm. Not far away, the Misty Moon Peak's face was filled with joy and seriousness as she guarded Wei Qingxian. In Wei Qingxuan's dantian, the 9 star rings were extremely bright and dazzling. These 9 star rings were compressing towards the center, as if they were about to merge into one. In Wei Qingxuan's body, all her meridians were occupied by star essence. 50% of her internal strength had been transformed into star essence. Moreover, her star essence was extremely pure and strong. This was because the spiritual martial inheritance that she cultivated was one of the most powerful spiritual martial inheritances of the lower spiritual martial art, the pure Yuan technique. Many sects had the pure Yuan technique. However, it was hard to find someone who could cultivate the pure Yuan technique even in 100 years. With Wei Qingxuan's destiny, it was natural for her to break through to the Star Vortex realm. Activating her pure Yuan art, she could sense the stars. Most of the warriors could only sense 1 star, but she could sense countless of them. If 1 star sent down a strand of star power, countless stars would send down countless strands of star power. For Wei Qingxian, the astral energy she could sense was almost endless. This made her feel as if she was bathing in an ocean of astral energy. The 9 astral rings in her dantian absorbed the boundless astral energy and compressed it at a very fast speed. Not long after, the 9 star rings were completely compressed together, forming a dazzling ball of star essence. At this moment, something seemed to have been triggered. The scene above Wei Qingxuan's head changed and turned into a vast and boundless starry sky. The crucial step of breaking through to the star vortex realm and becoming a martial saint was finally here. That was the awakening of the astrology. After the awakening of the astrology, martial artists could freely use the power of the astrology. Before that, it was impossible for martial artists to use the power of the astrology. The sudden change on the misty moon peak attracted the attention of all the martial artists above the star vortex realm in the spirit moon sect. They all felt a surge of star essence and looked towards the misty moon peak. In the sky above the misty moon peak, the bright sun had turned into an endless starry sky. No, not only the martial artists of the spirit moon sect, but all the martial artists above the star vortex realm in the entire spirit moon country. And even the entire Qingyun region suddenly felt something. At this moment, some kind of power shook their hearts. All the martial saints stopped and looked. All the perfected ones walked out of their secluded cultivation. They were shocked and looked in the direction of the spirit moon sect. In their eyes, the direction of the spirit moon sect had turned into a starry sky with countless sparkling stars. Everyone was shocked. Every martial artist above the star vortex realm knew that this was the scene of the awakening of the astrology. However, what shocked them was, whose astrology was this? How could it be so powerful? Usually, the awakening of the astrology could only be felt by those nearby. As long as they were a few hundred meters away, they would not be able to see the starry sky. After all, the starry sky that appeared during the awakening of the astrology was illusory. If one could not feel the awakening of the other party's astrology, it would be impossible to see the illusion of the starry sky. However, in the entire Qingyun region, all the martial artists above the star vortex realm could feel the starry sky. It was hard to imagine how powerful the awakening of the astrology was. Of course, they did not know who was awakening the astrology, nor did they know where it was. However, they could feel the direction and rush towards the spirit moon sect to find out what was going on. However, before they could fly very far, changes occurred in the starry sky. A star lit up, the light was resplendent, and became incomparably huge. Immediately after, a second star lit up, and became incomparably huge. All the martial saints and perfected ones were petrified at this moment. How could this be? A person's astrology only had one star. Only one star could be awakened in the astrology awakening. However, how could 2 stars awaken in the starry sky? What kind of astrology was this? Chapter 188. Most of the martial sages and perfected persons found it unbelievable and incomprehensible. Only a few old and knowledgeable perfected persons were shocked. They had heard of a legend before. Usually, a martial artist's astrology was a single star. However, there were also legends of multi-star astrology. For an astrology with many stars, there could be 2 or 3 stars, or 5 or 7 stars, or even more. Furthermore, when the awakened stars reached a certain level and were arranged according to a certain rule, they would form the ultimate existence of multi-star astrology, a constellation. The multi-star astrology was already a legend. As for the constellation astrology, only a few words were left behind in the ancient remnant books. No one knew how powerful an astrology would be if it was a constellation. In the starry sky, the second awakened star became extremely bright. Soon, there was a third, a fourth. The stars became bigger and brighter. However, the starry sky was boundless. No matter how big the stars were, they were just a drop in the ocean. No matter how many stars became bigger, they could not transcend the starry sky. All the martial sages were petrified. All the perfected persons were petrified. This was the first time they had seen so many stars awakening during an astrology awakening. Not only was there a multi-star astrology awakening, but the number of awakened stars was unimaginable. Could it be? This astrology awakening will awaken a constellation? Whose astrology awakening is this? In the entire Qingyun region, no. In the entire Truxian region, I have never heard of anyone awakening a constellation before. The few perfected persons who were more knowledgeable were so excited that their bodies trembled. Constellation astrology awakening was simply a legend, a myth. At this moment, They were witnessing this legend with their own eyes. As time passed, one star after another became bigger and brighter. There were already countless huge stars in the starry sky. Their radiance was resplendent, and they were connected into a whole. After about 2 hours, the martial sages and perfected persons finally saw the arrangement of the awakened stars in the starry sky and the general shape of the astrology awakening. The stars that had awakened in the starry sky were connected together to form half of a human face. There was even long hair behind it. Therefore, the final shape should be that of a woman's head. Furthermore, based on the shape, it should be the head of a beautiful woman. Qingyun region, Tianluo sect, on a mountain peak. A white-bearded and white-haired enlightened master looked towards the south, looking at the star pattern in the starry sky. He was extremely shocked and excited. Could this be the legendary Virgo constellation? Just who is it that has awakened such an astrological aspect? In the future, that person will definitely become a world-shaking, heaven-defying character. The white-haired reverend muttered to himself in astonishment. Such a nature-defying character will definitely stir up the entire star continent in the future. Our Qingyun region is a remote place. How can it accommodate such a nature-defying character? The Tianluo sect was one of the 2 oldest sects in the Qingyun region. This white-haired spiritual master was already over 180 years old and had vast knowledge. But he had only just heard of the Virgo constellation. It's actually the Virgo astrological sign that represents holiness. Such a character is rarely seen in the star continent in tens of thousands of years. In the future, he will definitely become a character that defies the natural order, enough to overturn the heavens and change fate. If the people of the Great Yuan dynasty find out about this, he will definitely die. You're lucky that I met you first. Consider yourself lucky. At the same time, somewhere in the Truxian region, a beautiful middle-aged woman was also muttering to herself. Then she raised her hand and tore the void, disappearing. In the next moment, this middle-aged woman appeared 100 miles away and tore the void again. This was no longer flying, but teleportation. 100 miles in an instant. This speed was truly shocking. A distance of 10,000 miles could be covered in 100 breaths of time. Qingyun region, Spirit Moon sect, Misty Moon Peak. Wei Qingxian still had a solemn expression. The awakening of the astrological sign was still going on. In the starry sky above her head, more and more stars were awakened. No one could remember exactly how many stars had been awakened. They only knew that it was endless. Finally, the awakening of the stars in the starry sky was nearing its end. It was indeed a woman's head. Moreover, it was the head of a beautiful young girl. Her face was absolutely beautiful, and her long hair was flowing elegantly. At first glance, people would involuntarily feel tranquil and would not have any evil thoughts. Not far away, Taoist Xianxia was already shocked to the point that she was numb. She was knowledgeable and had heard of many astrological signs. However, she had never heard of constellation signs, let alone Virgo constellation signs. Looking at the beautiful young girl's face in the starry sky and her long hair flowing elegantly, Taoist Xianxia could tell that Wei Qingxuan's astrological sign was not inferior to her destiny sign. In the starry sky, the awakening of the astrological sign was completed. The young girl's face and hair emitted a holy light. Then, she fell downwards and disappeared. Everything fell into Wei Qingxuan's body. In between her eyebrows, a starry sky was formed. Her astrological sign was located in the center of the starry sky. It was the head of a beautiful young girl, emitting a holy light, causing her to have a sense of holiness and tranquility. When people looked at it, they would not dare to have any blasphemous thoughts. Following the awakening of the astrological sign, the cluster of starlight in Wei Qingxuan's dantian began to revolve, forming a starlight vortex. The starlight vortex had a powerful suction force. The starlight vortex attracted the power of the stars from all directions and gathered in the starlight vortex, causing the light of the starlight vortex to gradually change from pale green to resplendent. In addition, the starlight vortex was covered with a layer of holy light, causing it to be different from others. This was clearly a change brought about by the astrological sign. Wei Qingxuan's cultivation had broken through to the celestial vortex realm and became a martial sage without experiencing any fortuitous encounters or consuming any medicinal herbs or elixirs. Enlightened Master Yenyue walked towards Wei Qingxian with a face full of surprise. She did not know that Wei Qingxuan's astrological sign had already attracted the attention of all the martial saints and enlightened masters in the Qingyun region. She was only surprised. However, before enlightened Master Yenyue could reach Wei Qingxuan's side, Wei Qingxian felt a wave of sleepiness attack her. Suddenly, a surge of energy gushed out from the depths of her mind, causing her to faint and fall to the ground. Qingxian. Enlightened Master Yenyue was shocked. She had never seen someone who had just broken through the celestial vortex realm and become a martial saint who had fainted. At this moment, images appeared in Wei Qingxuan's mind one after another. The blurry images in the past became clear this time. The figure that gave her a kind and fuzzy feeling was a middle-aged man. He had some stubble and was wearing a green robe with a crown on his head. He looked like a scholar. As soon as she saw the middle-aged scholar, Wei Qingxuan's heart rippled violently, making her feel incomparably close to him and incomparably excited. Even her parents in this life did not have such a strong feeling. Soon the images in her mind changed. The middle-aged scholar disappeared and was replaced by a beautiful young woman. She was holding a baby in her arms and feeding the baby. Under the care of the beautiful young woman, the baby gradually grew up. Soon, the middle-aged scholar's figure appeared again. It turned out that he was the baby's father. The images in his mind changed very quickly. The baby grew into an adult very quickly and turned into a beautiful girl who was as beautiful as a flower. Wei Qingxian was shocked again. The girl looked exactly like her. She felt that it was her. Could it be her previous life? The middle-aged scholar and his wife cared for their daughter in every possible way. At a young age, they began to teach their daughter to cultivate. She did not know how high the middle-aged scholar's cultivation was. When he made a move, he could turn the world upside down. There were traces of the great way of heaven and earth. Their daughter's talent was also very outstanding. When the conditions were right, success came naturally. As the images in his mind changed, Wei Qingxian always maintained the appearance of a 16 or 17-year-old. After an unknown number of years, she also overturned the world with a single move, rampaging through the world. However, she encountered an enemy who was even more powerful than her and severely injured her. The images in her mind stopped changing. The middle-aged scholar's figure appeared again, and his voice sounded in Wei Qingxuan's mind. Xian'er. You and your mother were both injured by Shueli Supreme. I was useless and could only use the reincarnation technique to save one of you. You are the sweetheart of your mother and I used the reincarnation technique to preserve your memories of your previous life. Reincarnate and live a new life. Your memories are in the depths of your mind. When you step into the star vortex realm, you will awaken part of your previous life's memories. In the future, as your cultivation increases, your memories will gradually awaken until they are complete. In this life, I will no longer let you be a flower in a greenhouse. I hope that you can rely on your own efforts to achieve something. Only by walking your own path can you have hope of becoming a supreme in the future. In order to prevent your enemies from noticing you, I will not meet you. You will have to rely on yourself for everything in this life. Your mother is sealed in the extreme frost ice jade by me. I can guarantee that she will not die for the time being. I am unable to save your mother. If there comes a day when you ascend to the position of supremacy, perhaps your mother will be able to see the light of day again if we work together. Work hard. Father will wait for you. As the voice faded, the middle-aged scholar's figure disappeared from Wei Qingxuan's mind. However, there was a trace of martial arts Dao left behind, which was comprehended and absorbed by Wei Qingxian. Wei Qingxian did not wake up. However, a drop of tear fell from the corner of her eye. Taoist Master Yenyue checked Wei Qingxuan's pulse. When she saw that Wei Qingxian was only unconscious, she heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from behind. She is the one who awakened the Virgo astrology? Taoist Master Yenyue's hair instantly stood on end. She had set up a level 3 array on Misty Moon Peak. Anyone who wanted to come up had to get her permission first. However, at this moment, someone actually came up to Misty Moon Peak and even came up behind her. She did not even notice it until the other party spoke. She only heard the voice but did not feel the person. Then, how terrifying was the person who came up? Taoist Master Yenyue turned around instantly and saw a beautiful middle-aged woman looking at the unconscious Wei Qingxian with a smile. Who are you? Taoist Master Yenyue shouted as if she was facing a great enemy. Brothers, today's monthly votes are too pitiful. As long as you subscribe to the Archer God, you will have a guaranteed monthly vote. 1 vote per person, which is a total of a few thousand votes. Why did you only cast 30 votes today? Brothers, please check the voting warehouse. Don't waste the monthly votes. Please vote for the Archer God, thank you. Chapter 189. The middle-aged woman shook her head and pointed at Wei Qingxian. Who I am is not important. What's important is her. Do you know how big of a commotion she caused? Taoist Master Yan Yu was surprised. Because she was near Wei Qingxian, it was normal for her to see Wei Qingxuan's astral projection. She did not expect others to see it as well. She did not expect all the martial saints and Taoist masters in the Qingyun region to see it. If it was a more powerful warrior, they would be able to sense it even if they were further away. For example, this middle-aged woman. Taoist Master Yan Yu asked subconsciously, how big of a commotion? The middle-aged woman said, I was just passing by the True Xian region. I sensed it and rushed over. Other warriors may not be able to sense it from such a distance, but the Star Marquis and Taoist masters within a radius of 10,000 miles should have sensed it. Taoist Master Yan Yu's face changed. With such a big commotion, she could not hide Wei Qingxian. With Wei Qingxuan's talent, not only would she suffer a great calamity, even the Spirit Moon sect would be in trouble. Not only that, the True Xian region was extremely vast. It had a circumference of nearly 1,000,000 miles. This middle-aged woman had passed through the True Xian region. It was unknown how far she was from the Spirit Moon sect. In the short period of time that Wei Qingxuan's astral soul had awakened, she had actually rushed to the Spirit Moon sect. The middle-aged woman saw the change in Taoist Master Yan Yu's face. You also know that it is a fool's dream for a mere 2-star Taoist master like you to protect her. If she stays here, not to mention you, even your sect will disappear. Give her to me. I will nurture her into a talent. As she spoke, the middle-aged woman took out a pill and handed it to Taoist Master Yan Yu. This is a Chengkuan fortune pill. It can extend your life by 60 years and let your bones return to their golden age. You can continue to cultivate. This is my thanks to you. Taoist Master Yan Yu could not see the middle-aged woman's cultivation. Moreover, she was sure that she was at least a martial saint, or even a king. The other party was giving her face by persuading her nicely. If he directly snatched Wei Qingxian away, there was nothing she could do. What's more, every word he said was true. As long as Wei Qingxuan's talent was known, not even the Spirit Moon sect would be able to protect her. In fact, it would bring disaster to the Spirit Moon sect. This beautiful middle-aged woman's cultivation was terrifyingly high, but she didn't try to snatch it by force. It could be seen that she didn't mean any harm to Wei Qingxian. Perhaps only someone as powerful as her could be Wei Qingxuan's backer. Reverend Yan Yu had no reason to refuse. Moreover, if she gave up Wei Qingxian, she would be able to obtain a Chengkuan fortune pill. She had never heard of this pill before. However, just the two effects of extending one's life by 60 years and restoring one's foundation to its golden age were enough to prove that this Chengkuan fortune pill was definitely an exceptional pill. Perhaps, it wasn't just a spirit pill. It was very likely to be a profound pill. It was definitely a priceless treasure that could only be found by chance. Sage Yan Yu pondered for a moment before accepting the Chengkuan fortune elixir. She asked, how should I address you, senior? Lon, Qin, King. The beautiful middle-aged woman held Wei Qingxian in her arms and uttered word by word. Reverend Yan Yu's shoulders trembled as her heart surged. King Lon Qin. The beautiful middle-aged woman was actually a king. She had never even seen a venerable one before, but today, she saw a king. She was so excited that she couldn't speak. King Lon Qin glanced at Reverend Yan Yu. How many people know her name? Reverend Yan Yu replied, I'm the only one in the sect who knows. King Lon Qin nodded. I'll tell everyone that I've already taken her away. However, if anyone still comes to investigate, don't tell them her real name. Also, I'll give you a piece of advice. If someone from the Great Yuan dynasty comes to investigate, you'd better run as far as you can. For them, destroying a small sect is as easy as stepping on an ant. With that, King Lon Qin waved her hand. The void in front of her tore open. She stepped in and disappeared. In the next instant, King Lan Qin appeared outside the Spirit Moon sect. With a wave of her hand, she grabbed a mountain peak that was several hundred meters tall and threw it into the distance with a deafening explosion. Many martial artists of the Spirit Moon sect were dumbfounded by King Lan Qin's actions. Moving a mountain with a wave of her hand. What kind of strength was this? King Lan Qin stood in the air and drew a few lines on the ground where she had moved the mountain peak. Soon, a line of large words appeared. King Lan Qin is taking away the Virgo constellation prodigy. Every word was several meters deep into the ground and emitted a terrifying aura. Even the martial artists of the Spirit Moon sect, who were watching from afar, felt a threatening aura. From this, it could be seen that they could only look at these words from afar. They couldn't even get close. After King Lan Qin drew these words, she tore open the void again and disappeared with Wei Qingxian. Azure Cloud Mountain Range. Yi Xing hadn't become a martial sage yet. Naturally, he hadn't sensed Wei Qingxuan's awakening. After some questioning, he learned that young Master Jin Shan, who he had killed in Eastern Mountain City, was the grandson of the Dongfu sect's sect master. As for him, he had been blacklisted by the Dongfu sect. Yi Xing finally understood why these 7 people knew him. They were all outer sect disciples of the Dongfu sect. They had already sent out a distress signal. The experts near the Dongfu sect would definitely come to their rescue. Once the news reached the sect, they would even send martial sage experts. Yi Xing felt that he couldn't stay here any longer. His invincible golden body had been cultivated to perfection, and his star essence conversion was close to 50%. The only thing he lacked was the second-grade array, the coiling snake array. He was still a little short, but the array didn't necessarily need to be cultivated in the Kunyan Mountain Range. Therefore, Yi Xing decided to leave the Kunyan Mountain Range and move to the depths of the Green Cloud Mountain Range. He wanted to see if he could find an opportunity to become a martial sage. The herbs that could help a martial artist become a martial sage were at least spiritual herbs. It was extremely difficult to find a spiritual herb in the Kunyan Mountain Range. Moreover, not all spiritual herbs could help a martial artist become a martial sage. Therefore, he could only try his luck in the depths of the Green Cloud Mountain Range. Yi Xing soon met up with Chu Jingyue and Lao He. They rode Lao He and went deeper into the Green Cloud Mountain Range. With their strength, they were not afraid of second-grade demonic beasts, which were equivalent to beginner martial sages. Lao He flew nearly 1,000 miles into the depths of the Green Cloud Mountain Range. Then he was attacked. A winged flying snake, which was equivalent to a second-grade martial sage, soared into the sky and rushed toward Lao He. When it was a few hundred meters away from Lao He, it spat out a mouthful of poisonous water like an arrow. Lao He flapped his wings, creating gusts of wind. The wind blades were like knives, splitting the poisonous water arrow. Lao He quickly fell to the ground. While flying in the air, he divided his demonic power to protect Yi Xing and Chu Jingyue from the gale. Otherwise, the 2 of them would fall and it would be difficult for them to fight the winged flying snake. Yi Xing took out his spiritual inscription bow in the air and shot an arrow. At this time, Yi Xing's star essence had been converted to nearly 50%. The stacked arrow technique had reached 15 stacked stacks. The bow was also a spiritual weapon. The power of the arrow was much stronger than when he had killed a 1-star martial sage. Even the winged flying snake, which was equivalent to a 2-star martial sage, showed fear in the face of Yi Xing's arrow. It swayed its body in the air and swept its huge tail, colliding with the arrow. Sparks flew. The arrow was whipped into the distance by the snake's tail. However, the scales of the snake's tail were damaged and some blood flowed out. To the winged flying snake, this was not much of an injury. However, it was still injured, especially by a half-step martial sage. It was immediately enraged. It let out a long ear-piercing hiss and continued to pounce. When they were about 100 meters away from the ground, Yi Xing pulled Chu Jingyue and jumped down from Lao He's back. Lao He had no more worries. He flapped his wings and rushed toward the winged flying snake. The snake and the eagle suddenly fought in the air. Yi Xing performed the wild goose cloud flight and landed safely with Chu Jingyue. After that, he immediately took out an arrow and put it on the bow. The strength of the double-winged flying snake was inferior to that of Blackie. It was only equivalent to an ordinary 2-star martial sage. However, it was poisonous and Blackie was wary of it. Therefore, the 2 of them were almost evenly matched. If Yi Xing fought the winged flying snake alone, he would not be its opponent at all. However, shooting an arrow at this time could play a decisive role. Whoosh! Just as the winged flying snake and Lao He were fighting fiercely, Yi Xing suddenly shot an arrow. With Yi Xing's eyesight, this arrow was naturally not wrong. It accurately shot into one of the winged flying snake's wings. The winged flying snake's wings were damaged and it had problems flying. It could not dodge in time and was viciously scratched by Lao He's claws. The snake's scales splashed and blood dripped. The winged flying snake was injured and did not dare to fight again. It immediately fled into the distance. Lao He wanted to chase after it, but Yi Xing called it back with a long whistle. This was the territory of second-level demonic beasts. It was not good to be too ostentatious. If he chased after the winged flying snake, it might attract other powerful demonic beasts. Therefore, it was better to chase it away. Near the winged flying snake's nest, Yi Xing obtained several spiritual herbs. Although these spiritual herbs had nothing to do with breaking through to the celestial vortex realm, as spiritual herbs, they were extremely precious. They could be refined into spiritual pills to improve the cultivation speed of the celestial vortex realm or detoxification spiritual pills. In the territory of second-level demonic beasts, Yi Xing did not dare to fly freely in the air with Lao He. Being attacked by the winged flying snake was a lesson. If the winged flying snake was equivalent to a 3-star martial sage, then Yi Xing's side would be at a disadvantage. The efficiency of searching for spiritual herbs on the ground was extremely low. After a day, except for a few spiritual herbs in the winged flying snake's nest, there was no other harvest. Early in the morning, Yi Xing and the others found a place to spend the night. It was a natural cave. As usual, Lao He guarded outside. Yi Xing and Chu Jingyue cultivated inside. Chu Jingyue cultivated the all-water art and continued to transform her star essence, while Yi Xing learned the snake coiling array. As long as he mastered the snake coiling array, he could use the array to hunt all second-level demonic beasts, which were equivalent to a first-level martial sage. After this day, Yi Xing's snake coiling array was 99% complete. In order to complete it in one go, Yi Xing did not go out to look for spiritual herbs the next day. At noon, Yi Xing finally mastered the snake coiling array and set it up successfully. Yi Xing was overjoyed. A plan to hunt demonic beasts and look for spiritual herbs formed in his mind. However, before he could carry out this plan, he suddenly felt a fluctuation of star force in the distance, which made him change his mind. Yi Xing looked into the distance and saw a star force light column shooting into the sky from the direction of the Kunyan mountain range. He did not know what had happened. Roll over and ask for 10 monthly votes for the Archer God. 10 votes, do you have it? Chapter 190. Yi Xing had never felt such a strong fluctuation of star force before. The distance between him and the star force light beam was at least 250 kilometers. Even so, he could clearly feel the fluctuation of star force coming from the star force light beam. It could be seen that the star force contained in the star force light beam was really shocking. Even though Chu Jingyue's eyesight was not as good as Yi Xing's, there was basically no difference between their eyesight at such a long distance. Chu Jingyue also saw the star force light beam in the distance and felt the fluctuation of star force. Then, what's going on? Chu Jingyue asked in surprise. Yi Xing shook his head. I don't know. Let's go and have a look. The star force light beam did not last long. After about 10 breaths, it rushed into the sky and disappeared without a trace. But the two had already memorized the approximate location of the star force light beam. They got on Lao He and flew there. At the same time, with the star force light beam as the center, warriors and demonic beasts within a radius of nearly 500 kilometers all saw the star force light beam soaring into the sky and felt the fluctuation of star force. Some powerful martial artist teams, as well as some powerful demonic beasts, were all rushing over there. Lao He was obviously the fastest. Eagles were one of the fastest birds, not to mention the black-feathered eagle, which was equivalent to a beginner martial sage. At this moment, Yi Xing naturally urged Lao He to fly as fast as possible. It only took them a little more than 15 minutes to reach the destination. The place where the star force light beam was located was very easy to find because the ground there had cracked, creating a canyon that was 100 meters long. Moreover, many high-level ferocious beasts were fighting to the death around the canyon. These ferocious beasts were obviously nearby and had come here first. For some reason they were fighting to the death. Moreover, Yi Xing could see that there were more ferocious beasts in the distance coming this way. As for the warriors, Yi Xing's distance was limited, so he had not found them yet. My God! What's the reason for these ferocious beasts to fight to the death? Chu Jingyue also saw the scene beside the canyon and exclaimed. Beside the canyon, there were a few corpses of ferocious beasts. Most of the ferocious beasts had retreated after being defeated. There were still a few ferocious beasts that were still fighting. They were the strongest of the high-level ferocious beasts. Yi Xing sensed another wave of astral power, which originated from the cracked canyon. The reason lies in that canyon. Let's go and take a look. Yi Xing pointed at the canyon and had Blackie fly directly above it. When Yi Xing looked into the depths of the canyon, he immediately became spirited. This canyon was over 100 meters deep. There was not enough light below, so ordinary martial artists would not be able to see clearly. However, with Yi Xing's eyesight, he was able to see clearly. The bottom of the canyon was densely packed with star crystals. In the middle of the valley, there was a pool of milky white liquid. The source of the astral power fluctuations was this pool of milky white liquid. At the bottom of the canyon, there's a star crystal lode. It's a newly formed star crystal lode. In the center of the canyon, there's a pool of star crystal spiritual milk. Yi Xing looked excited and his voice was full of excitement. Star crystal lode? Star crystal spiritual milk? Chu Jingyue suddenly became excited and said excitedly, "We found a star crystal lode. If we tell the sect about it, we'll get 10,000 contribution points. The star crystal spiritual milk is the purest star power. It's enough for our cultivation to break through the star vortex realm and become a martial sage." No wonder they were so excited. Their first purpose of coming out was to find the opportunity to become a martial sage. Now, they had found the opportunity and it was right in front of them. Moreover, it came with a star crystal lode, which was worth 10,000 contribution points. It was more than 100 times more valuable than any sect mission. They immediately understood why the ominous beasts were fighting to the death here. The star crystal lode was not attractive to the ominous beasts, but the star crystal spiritual milk was enough to make a high-level ominous beast break through to become a second-level ominous beast. It was like making an ordinary martial artist break through to become a martial sage. This attraction was too strong. Yi Xing let Blackie land. As soon as they landed, he and Chu Jingyue jumped off Blackie's back. Several high-level ominous beast overlords who were fighting stopped fighting when they felt the aura of a second-level ominous beast. They looked fearful. However, the star crystal spiritual milk determined whether they could become second-level ominous beasts or not. Therefore, even though they were afraid of Blackie, they did not retreat but growled in a low voice. Yi Xing waved his hand and Blackie pounced on the high-level ominous beast overlords. He and Chu Jingyue had to get the star crystal spiritual milk. They could not let these ominous beasts have a share. High-level ominous beast overlords were still first-level ominous beasts. However, Blackie was a second-level ominous beast. These high-level ominous beast overlords were no match for it and were quickly killed by Blackie. Yi Xing looked into the distance and looked around. Some of the ominous beasts who rushed over saw that Blackie had killed several high-level ominous beast overlords and retreated far away. They did not dare to come over. Although the temptation of becoming a second-level ominous beast was great and worth risking their lives for, the ominous beasts did not dare to rush up when they knew they would die. "Senior brother Yi, let's go down together and absorb the star crystal spiritual milk to break through the star vortex and become a martial sage," Chu Jingyue said excitedly. Standing at the edge of the canyon, she also saw the star crystal spiritual milk at the bottom of the canyon. Yi Xing waved his hand and said, "The starlight beam just now must have attracted many powerful warriors and ominous beasts. These high-level ominous beasts are just nearby ominous beasts. There may be more martial sages and second-level ominous beasts coming here. We must guard this opportunity. You go down and cultivate first. After you break through to the martial sage realm, you can go back with Blackie and report the news to the sect. I will first set up a formation around the canyon above. Once the formation is completed, I can cultivate in peace without any worries." Chu Jingyue looked surprised. When faced with the opportunity to become a martial sage, most people would only focus on cultivating first. At this time, there were very few people who were as calm as Yi Xing. Chu Jingyue frowned and said, "What if the star crystal spiritual milk is not enough for you to break through the star vortex after I absorb it? What should we do? Yixing smiled and said, You can rest assured. The star crystal spiritual milk inside is enough for both of us to break through to the star vortex realm. You go down. Not only do we have to guard the star crystal spiritual milk, but we can't let the people of the Dongfu sect know that there is a star crystal lode below. Otherwise, the Dongfu sect is closer to here. Once the enlightened masters of the Dongfu sect arrive here first, the lode will be taken over by the Dongfu sect. A star crystal lode could yield at least 100,000 star crystals or even millions of star crystals. Star crystals were indispensable for warriors to restore their star power, array masters to set up arrays, and array masters to maintain arrays. To a sect, a star crystal lode was an extremely important resource for war preparations. Although this star crystal lode was located in the Kuan-Yun mountain range, which was closer to the Dongfu sect than to the Yixing, must try his best to keep the lode in the hands of the falling star sect since he had discovered it first. There was only one way to keep the lode in the hands of the An, that was to delay the news of the star crystal lode from the Dongfu sect. If the Dongfu sect did not know that a star crystal lode had appeared in the Kuan-Yun mountain range and the formation masters of the falling star sect had already set up layers of formations around the lode, then it was obvious that the Dongfu sect would not be able to take the lode away. If the falling star sect had not taken control of the lode, the Dongfu sect would know about it and the two sects would compete. This place was closer to the Dongfu sect, so the falling star sect would not be able to fight for a long time. The Dongfu sect would have a great advantage. Therefore, what Yixing had to do was to block the news. He had to set up the snake coiling formation around the star crystal lode. As long as the Dongfu sect's warriors came, he would kill them one by one. If two came, he would kill them both to ensure that the news would not spread. As for Chu Jingyue, as long as her cultivation broke through to the star vortex realm, she would be responsible for sending the news back to the sect. As for her directly returning to the sect with Old Black, it was not advisable. Although this would allow the sect to receive the news faster, Yixing did not set up the formation. Once the demonic beasts or warriors disturbed him, he would not be able to continue. Therefore, when he was setting up the formation, Old Black had to protect him. At this time, Chu Jingyue could absorb the star crystal spiritual milk and break through the star vortex realm. After hearing Yixing's explanation, Chu Jingyue did not say anything more and went down the canyon. What she needed to do now was to break through to the star vortex realm as soon as possible and then return to the sect. Yixing asked Old Black to protect him. Any demonic beasts or warriors who came close to the canyon would be killed without mercy. Yixing himself was around the canyon, inscribing formation patterns and setting up the snake coiling formation. Although Yixing's cultivation was only at the half-step martial sage realm, the spiritual martial arts inheritance he practiced was the pure vitality technique. The strength of his celestial essence was extremely high, and was not inferior to that of a one-star martial sage. It was enough for him to set up an ordinary snake coiling formation. However, in terms of the amount of celestial essence, he was far inferior to a one-star martial sage. But it did not matter. If his celestial essence was insufficient, he could recover it with star crystals. Yixing still had some low-grade star crystals that Gu Tianxiang had given him. Moreover, there was a star crystal lode below the canyon. Yixing could dig up a large pile of star crystals at any time. By constantly recovering his celestial essence with star crystals, Yixing could set up a large-scale snake coiling formation. Moreover, Yixing used the materials available and placed star crystals to inscribe the formation patterns. As long as the formation was completed, there would be an endless supply of energy. The canyon was more than 100 meters long and dozens of meters wide. If Yixing wanted to set up a snake coiling formation that covered the entire canyon, it would be much more difficult than setting up a small model of the snake coiling formation. Before he could even complete 1/10 of the formation, a level 2 demonic beast, Storm Leopard, which was equivalent to a one-star martial sage, came here and rushed directly toward the canyon. Fortunately, Lao Hei was there to protect him. He rushed up and blocked the attack, so it didn't affect Yixing's formation. The star crystal spiritual essence could not only help a warrior to become a martial saint or a grade 1 demonic beast to advance to a grade 2 demonic beast, but it could also increase the cultivation of a martial saint or a grade 2 demonic beast. Therefore, the storm leopard had fought with its life on the line and was killed by Lao Hei in the end. When Yixing's coiling snake formation was about 30% complete, a new problem came. This time, it was a group of 5 martial sages that had come. The following is free. Ever since that day, he had felt a stabbing pain at the lower right side of his sternum, and it had been a dull pain for the next few days. Sweat. Thinking of the sudden death of a few web authors, I felt a little scared. Thinking back to the past 2 years, I hadn't gone to the hospital for a checkup, and because I didn't exercise while writing, my update rate had always exceeded that of the masses. My body had always been in a state of fatigue. I couldn't have contracted a serious illness this time. Could I? What if I got sick? Would I still have time to finish writing The Archer God? Today, I quickly went to the hospital for a checkup. Fortunately, the doctor said that it was just an inflammation of the gallbladder, nothing serious. It wasn't liver cancer like I was worried about. Thank God. This kind of mentality is really hard to describe. Brothers, please don't laugh at me. I was really worried. But now I feel relieved. I definitely have time to finish writing The Archer God. Our Archer God Yi is about to become a martial sage. Brothers, please support me with a guaranteed monthly vote. Chapter 191. The 5 of them were inner disciples of the Dongfu sect. 2 of them were 2-star martial sages and 3 were 1-star martial sages. They rode on 5 green winged eagles. These 5 were the inner disciples that the 7 outer disciples of the Dongfu sect wanted to find to kill Yi Xing. Among the 2-star martial sages, the man was Zi Chuanyu and the woman was Yi Shi. Zi Chuanyu was famous in the inner disciples of the Dongfu sect because he had the ability to challenge those of a higher level. He was not only invincible among the 2-star martial sages, but he could even fight against a 3-star martial sage. Senior brother Yu, there is a canyon ahead. This should be where the star power light pillar is. Senior sister Kong, there is a black-feathered eagle and a half-step martial sage ahead. The team was led by Zi Chuanyu and Yi Shi. The 1-star martial sages reported the situation to the 2 of them. However, they did not need to report. Zi Chuanyu and Yi Shi could tell at a glance. They were still 1,000 meters away from the canyon when Blackie flew into the sky and blocked their way. In the distance, Yi Xing stopped inscribing runes. The 5 martial sages arrived at the same time. 2 of them were 2-star martial sages. Yi Xing knew that Blackie alone could not stop them. Yi Xing raised his hand. The spiritual inscription Bao and the green sandalwood arrow appeared in his hands. He fixed his eyes on Zi Chuanyu and the other 4. Yi Xing had heard the conversation between the 7 outer disciples of the Dongfu sect that he had killed. Therefore, when he saw the 5 martial saints, he immediately guessed their identities. Friend, is this your black-feathered eagle? When Zi Chuanyu saw the black-feathered eagle blocking their way, he looked down at Yi Xing in the distance and asked. He and the other 4 martial sages were surprised. Even they did not have a martial sage level flying mount. They were riding on level 1 demonic beasts, the green wind eagles. However, Yi Xing was only a half-step martial sage. If the black-feathered eagle was his mount, it would be too shocking. Are you the inner disciples of the Dongfu sect? Yi Xing did not answer Zi Chuanyu's question. He said coldly, You are Zi Chuanyu. She is Yi Shi? As he spoke, Yi Xing glanced at Yi Shi. This was a woman with a very voluptuous chest. Seeing Yi Xing's gaze sweep over, Yi Shi puffed out her ample bosom and said, Little handsome, your tone is not right. How dare you speak to me and senior brother you like that? Where are you from? These 5 people had been out training for several months and had yet to return to the sect, so they did not know Yi Xing. Yi Xing sneered, I'm a dog slaughterer who specializes in killing Dongfu dogs. Yi Shi's face darkened. Are you a Luo Xing? Zi Chuanyu and the rest were filled with murderous intent. Yi Xing was only a half-step martial sage. It was strange for him to be with a martial saint-level black-feathered eagle. Zi Chuanyu and the others thought that he was a disciple of the Blood Spectre sect, so they asked him a few questions. This was because the Blood Spectre sect's Blood Spectre I could easily tame demonic beasts. The Blood Spectre sect was famous in the Green Cloud region for taming demonic beasts. They were the strongest of the 6 sects in the Green Cloud region. The Dongfu sect and the Blood Spectre sect were allies. Now that they knew that the other party was not a disciple of the Blood Spectre sect, but a disciple of their enemy, the Zi Chuanyu and the others were filled with murderous intent. Kill the black-feathered eagle first, then kill that little bastard. Zi Chuanyu shouted as he took out a spiritual weapon. He rode the green wind eagle and charged toward Lao He. The black-feathered eagle was very fast. Zichuanyu knew that if the black-feathered eagle carried the other party away, the 5 of them would not be able to catch up. As long as they killed the black-feathered eagle, the other party was only a half-step martial sage. With the green wind eagle chasing after them, the other party would die. Therefore, killing the black-feathered eagle first would cut off the other party's path of survival. The other 4 martial sages also controlled the green wind eagle and charged toward Lao He. Lao He also let out a sharp cry as the feathers on his neck stood up. He flapped his wings and stirred up a fierce wind as he charged toward the 5 martial sages. Lao He was stronger than a 2-star martial sage. The strongest of the 5 martial sages was only a 2-star martial sage. He was not afraid at all. At this moment, Yixing had already knocked an arrow on his bow and aimed at a 1-star martial sage. A 1-star martial sage who rode the green wind eagle in the sky was a live target for Yixing whoosh. The green sandalwood arrow left the bow and flashed like a flowing light, making a sound as it pierced through the air. However, the arrow left the bow faster than the sound. Before the 1-star martial sage could hear the sound of the arrow piercing through the air, the green sandalwood arrow had already shot toward him. In an instant, the 1-star martial sage's expression turned into one of shock. At the same time, the other 4 martial sages were also shocked. Obviously, they did not expect Yixing's arrow to be so fast. Obviously, they had underestimated Yixing. At this moment, the other 4 martial sages had already launched their attacks toward Lao He. The 1-star martial sage who was attacked by the arrow was also about to attack Lao He. He could not resist the arrow that suddenly shot toward him. In a hurry, the 1-star martial sage could only circulate his celestial essence to form a defensive layer in front of the arrow. The defensive layer formed by the martial sage's celestial essence was almost like an iron wall for cultivators below the martial sage realm. It was basically impossible to break through. However, the result was far beyond the 1-star martial sage's expectations. Puff! The arrow easily penetrated his celestial essence defense. Then, without slowing down, it shot forward and pierced his throat. An arrow pierced the throat and killed him in one blow. The 1-star martial sage died in an instant. He fell off the back of the green wind eagle and fell to the ground. The green wind eagle was also shocked by Yixing's arrow. It let out a scream of fear and immediately turned around to flee. At this moment, Lao He and the other 4 martial sages clashed. The terrifying power immediately sent him flying more than 100 meters. Countless feathers fell from the void and many bloodstains appeared on his claws. Obviously, the joint attack of the 4 martial sages was extremely powerful. Lao He could not resist it. In the first round, he was repelled and injured. However, compared to the 5 martial sages, one of them had died. It was obvious that Yixing's side had the upper hand. "You guys kill this beast. I'll go kill that little bastard," Zichuanyu shouted angrily. The murderous intent in his eyes was even stronger. After witnessing Yixing's archery skills, he knew that he could not allow Yixing to shoot arrows from a distance. Otherwise, the other 2 1-star martial sages would definitely be killed. Moreover, even if he and Xianxia were to fight with the black-feathered eagle, Yixing's sudden arrow would be impossible to guard against. The black-feathered eagle let out a scream and flapped its wings. It wanted to stop Zichuanyu. However, Xianxia and the other 2 1-star martial sages immediately attacked and the black-feathered eagle was unable to defend itself. Originally, the black-feathered eagle's strength was not much stronger than Xianxia. With the help of the 2 1-star martial sages, the strength of the 2 sides was already on par. Now, the black-feathered eagle was injured and could not fully display its strength. Under the attacks of Xianxia and the other 2, it was naturally at a disadvantage and could not take care of Yixing's swoosh. Swoosh! Swoosh! When Yixing saw Zichuanyu rushing over, he took out 3 arrows at the same time. One arrow after another. 3 arrows were shot consecutively. Clang! 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 However, Zichuanyu's strength was not to be underestimated. With 3 consecutive slashes, 3 flaming saber radiances were shot out and the 3 arrows were sent flying. The green wind eagle carried Zichuanyu and rushed toward Yixing like an arrow. In a few breaths' time, they would be in front of Yixing obviously. Yixing's archery skills could not threaten Zichuanyu's strength. However, Yixing was not afraid at all. In the next moment, Yixing took out 3 more arrows. In a flash, the 3 arrows were placed on the bowstring and shot out at the same time. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 3 arrows were shot at the same time. The 3 arrows were shot out at the same time. They were shot in different directions and drew 3 distorted trajectories in the void. This time, it was not the wave-stacking arrow technique but the spinning arrow technique. The spinning arrow technique was only a middle-grade martial skill. In terms of lethality, it was thousands of miles away from the wave-stacking arrow technique. However, it had its own special uses. Yixing did not intend to kill the enemy with these 3 arrows. Instead, he had another purpose. Just as Yixing had expected, Zichuanyu had already slashed his saber at him. The flaming saber radiance shot out for dozens of feet but did not touch any of the arrows. The arrows' trajectories were distorted and Zichuanyu was shocked. For a moment, he could not catch the trajectories of the 3 arrows. However, Zichuanyu was after all a powerful person. The shock only lasted for a moment before he regained his composure. The spiritual weapon in his hand, along with the flaming saber radiance, was slashed out continuously. Clang! Clang! In such a short period of time, he was able to see through the trajectories of 2 more arrows. With 2 crisp sounds, the 2 arrows were instantly sent flying. However, Yixing had shot a total of 3 arrows. Although Zichuanyu had blocked 2 of them, he had made a mistake and the flaming saber radiance hit empty air. In an instant, Zichuanyu circulated his celestial essence and covered his body with a layer of celestial essence defense. He could see that the power contained in Yixing's 3 arrows was much weaker than the previous arrows. It was impossible for them to penetrate his celestial essence defense. However, Zichuanyu did not expect that the arrow that was not blocked did not hit his body. Instead, it spun in the air and instantly hit the heart of the blue-winged eagle below him. The blue-winged eagle let out a mournful cry and suddenly fell from the sky, dead. At this time, the blue-winged eagle was still nearly 200 meters in the air. At such a height, a half-step martial sage would fall to his death even if he had a movement skill. However, Zichuanyu was not a half-step martial sage but a 2-star martial sage. He circulated his celestial essence and instantly condensed a pair of celestial essence wings on his back, slowing down the speed of his fall. Martial sages could use celestial essence to form wings and glide. Although the celestial essence wings were not strong and could not glide too far, they would not die from a height of 200 to 300 meters. Zichuanyu was furious that his mount had been killed by a half-step martial sage in a head-on battle. His eyes were almost burning with flames. "Thief! I will tear you into pieces!" Zichuanyu let out a roar that shook the sky. Holding the spiritual weapon with both hands, with a terrifying flaming saber radiance, he slashed down at Yixing from above. Chapter 192. Wild Goose Cloud Sword. Yixing dared not touch Zichuanyu's flaming saber radiance. He activated his lightness skill to the maximum and merged it with the wind to retreat. Yixing's Qinggong of the transcendent state was already extremely fast. Coupled with the addition of the wind, Yixing's speed reached a terrifying level in an instant. The flaming saber radiance missed and created a 10-meter-long crack on the ground. The ground was charred black. Zichuanyu was surprised that Yixing was able to dodge his attack. However, he snorted coldly in his heart. In his opinion, Yixing's light body technique was indeed extraordinary. Perhaps he could dodge 1 or 2 of his attacks, but the speed of his attacks had to be faster than the speed of his opponent's dodging. It could be done once, but not thrice. He did not think that Yixing could dodge 3 attacks from him. "I'll chop your head off in 3 attacks." Zichuanyu held the spiritual weapon saber with both hands and shouted angrily. He rushed toward Yixing. However, Yixing, who was not far away, did not dodge at all. Instead, he looked at Zichuanyu with disdain. At this moment, the void around Zichuanyu twisted. Suddenly, several astral snakes appeared and pounced on Zichuanyu at the same time. It was a level 2 array, the coiling snake array. Yixing knew that he was no match for Zichuanyu. As he dodged, he took out the coiling snake array disc that Gu Tianshang had given him. Although it was an ordinary level 2 array disc, it was enough to kill a beginner martial sage. The sudden appearance of the Star Force snakes was beyond Zichuanyu's expectation. He was shocked. The spiritual weapon saber in his hand slashed out a flaming saber screen and slashed in all directions. Bang! 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 A series of explosions sounded. The Star Force snakes were not cut by Zichuanyu's flaming saber radiance. Instead, Zichuanyu was pushed back by the counterforce. A level 2 array disc? Zichuanyu was shocked and shocked. He had never imagined that Yi Xing, a half-step martial sage, would have a rank 2 array disc. This item was extremely rare and even the inner disciples of the Dongfu sect would find it difficult to obtain it. Formation discs were the weakest formations of the same level. An ordinary grade 2 snake coiling formation disc could not kill a 3-star martial saint, but it was more than enough to kill a 1-star or 2-star martial saint. Although Zichuanyu's strength was comparable to a 3-star martial saint's, he was still inferior to a 3-star martial saint in a life-and-death battle. Therefore, Zichuanyu was at a disadvantage in the coiling snake array activated by the array disc and was repelled by the star power serpent. However, Zichuanyu's strength was comparable to a 3-star martial saint. It would not be easy for the coiling snake array to kill him. Seeing that Zichuanyu was blocked by the coiling snake formation, the corners of Yi Xing's mouth curled up. He knocked an arrow on his bow and pointed it at a 1-star martial saint who was fighting fiercely with Lao Hei in the distance. Stop! In the coiling snake array, Zichuanyu shouted angrily, "If you dare to harm my Dongfu sect's disciple again, I will make you beg for death." Zichuanyu knew that with the archery skills Yi Xing had just displayed, it would not be difficult for him to kill a 1-star martial saint. Yi Xing glanced at Zichuanyu and said, "Don't worry, it will be your turn later." Then with a whoosh, the arrow left the bowstring. The 15-stacked forces blue sandalwood arrow was extremely powerful. Even a 2-star martial saint would be severely injured if he was not killed by it. Clang! The result was obvious. The arrow shook off the weapon in the 1-star martial saint's hand and shot into his chest. Because of the weapon's obstruction, the arrow did not hit any vital parts. However, the arrow piercing through the chest was still a serious injury. How sharp were the eagle's eyes! Seeing that the 1-star martial saint was injured, Lao Hei attacked him with his claws. The injured 1-star martial saint almost fell off the back of the blue-winged eagle after being hit by the arrow. How could he resist Lao Hei's claws? His head was instantly scratched open and he died. As he killed the 1-star martial saint with one claw, Lao Hei was also attacked by Ishii and another 1-star martial saint. The demonic beast's body was huge and its vitality was tenacious. Lao Hei was only slightly injured after being attacked by the two. Lao Hei was at a disadvantage when fighting 1 against 3. Now that he had killed a 1-star martial saint, the pressure on him was greatly reduced and he was about to turn the tables. At this time, Yi Xing took out a blue sandalwood arrow from afar. He knocked the arrow on his bow and aimed at the only 1-star martial saint alive. "Bastard! You are courting death. I will break your bones inch by inch and let you die a horrible death." In the coiling snake formation, Zichuanyu saw that another junior martial brother was killed by Yi Xing. He roared furiously and waved his spiritual weapon, attacking the star power snakes crazily. Unfortunately, although it was difficult for the coiling snake formation to kill him, he was far from being able to break the coiling snake formation. No matter how hard he tried, he was repelled by the star power snakes and could not escape. Whoosh! The arrow pierced through the air with a loud sound. The only 1-star martial saint alive was suppressed by Lao Hei's counterattack and could not escape from Yi Xing's arrow. He was shot in the heart by Yi Xing and died instantly. 3 1-star martial saints died one after another. Zichuanyu was trapped in the coiling snake formation and Ishii was scared out of her wits. She did not dare to fight with Lao Hei and controlled the blue wind eagle to escape. The blue wind eagle's speed was much slower than Lao Hei's. Lao Hei flapped his wings and chased after Zichuanyu. Ishii was shocked. She jumped down from the blue wind eagle and survived. However, the blue wind eagle was caught by Lao Hei's claw. Lao Hei's other claw followed and the eagle's beak pecked down. The blue wind eagle was killed by Lao Hei's storm-like attack. A pair of celestial essence wings appeared on Ishii's back. After landing on the ground, she didn't try to escape. Instead, she rushed towards Yi Xing. As she flew, Ishii tore her clothes. Her plump breasts suddenly popped out and jiggled. "Young master, please spare my life." Ishii almost tore off all her clothes. As she tore, she shouted, "Don't kill me. I'll give you everything. My skills are superb. I'll definitely serve you well." Don't kill me. Ishi, you bitch. How dare you beg for mercy from this bastard? Chuanyu, who was in the coiling snake formation, was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He was one of Ishii's gigolos. Yi Xing's eyes narrowed. He did not see Ishii's naked body. Instead, he saw the figures of Wan Xingliang, Lu Chen, and Yang Yun, his 3 dead comrades. Yi Xing was unmoved by Ishii's begging. With a whoosh, the arrow in his hand burst out. At the same time, Lao Hei in the air also threw the blue wind eagle's body and swooped down from the sky. He grabbed Ishii's head with his sharp claws. For Lao Hei, no matter how naked Ishii was, she was not attractive at all. If Ishii resisted with all her strength, she might be able to hold on for a few breaths under the joint attack of Yi Xing and Lao Hei. But now, she took off her clothes and ran naked. How could she resist the joint attack of Yi Xing and Lao Hei? She died in an instant. Ah! Chuanyu roared. Although he was angry that Ishii had begged for mercy, he was even more furious that Ishii was killed. Under such circumstances, Chuanyu's potential was stimulated. He was able to exert almost 120% of his strength. There was a faint sign that he was going to break the coiling snake formation. It's your turn now. Seeing this, Yi Xing took out 3 blue sandalwood arrows without hesitation. He performed the wave-stacking arrow technique and shot 3 arrows at Chuanyu. Clang! 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 Chuanyu was locked in a fierce battle with the coiling snake formation when he was suddenly attacked by Yi Xing's arrows. Although he managed to block the 3 arrows with his saber, he was still unable to focus on one thing. In the blink of an eye, Chuanyu was hit by 2 Star Force snakes. He spat out blood and fell to the ground. The next moment, several Star Force snakes swarmed over Chuanyu. In the blink of an eye, Chuanshou was turned into a corpse. Yi Xing and Lao Hei worked together and used the coiling snake formation disc that Gu Tianshang had given him. Finally, they killed all 5 of the Dongfu sect's inner disciples and kept the news of the star crystal load under control. Yi Xing did not have time to search for Chuanyu and the other 4. He threw a supreme spiritual herb with healing effects to Lao Hei, and immediately began to engrave the formation inscriptions. He knew that Chuanyu and the other 4 would not be their final opponents. There might be more powerful martial artists or demonic beasts. Without the coiling snake formation, he would not be able to fend off the enemies. He would not have time to absorb the star crystal spiritual milk to break through the stellar vortex and become a martial sage. However, Yi Xing did not expect that the Dongfu sect would be informed of Chuanyu's death the moment he died. Chapter 193. Chuanyu was one of the famous geniuses among the inner disciples of the Dongfu sect. He was the focus of the Dongfu sect. The Dongfu sect attached great importance to each of its disciples, especially their life and death. The array masters of the sect had engraved an array that could detect their life aura. If they died, their life aura would disappear and the array would collapse. Once the array collapsed, the array flags in the hands of the array masters of the sect would shatter. The array masters could determine who had died based on the broken array flags. Once Chuanyu died, the array that could detect his life aura collapsed. The array in the hands of the array masters of the sect that was connected to the array on Chuanyu's body also shattered. Therefore, the array masters knew that Chuanyu was dead. The death of an inner disciple was not a small matter. The Dongfu sect wanted to know the cause of Chuanyu's death, and immediately started an investigation. The Dongfu sect did not know the exact location of Chuanyu's death. They only knew that Chuanyu, Ishii Kong, and the other 4 had entered the Blue Cloud Mountains to train. Therefore, the Dongfu sect could only send people to the Blue Cloud Mountains to investigate. The focus of the investigation was the area where Chuanyu and the other 4 had been. They also had to investigate the area within 1,000 miles. A perfected being elder led the team, which included core disciples, disciples of the human sect, and deacons. There were more than 10 martial saints who entered the Blue Cloud Mountains. The area where Chuanyu and the other 4 had been training was deeper in the Blue Cloud Mountains. It was an area where level 2 demonic beasts, which were equivalent to beginner martial saints, lived. It was the focus of the Dongfu sect's investigation. The perfected being elder and some martial saints with high cultivation went there to investigate. As for the Kunyan mountain range, There were usually only high-level ferocious beasts. Only level 2 demonic beasts would occasionally appear. Most of the warriors who trained there were below the martial sage realm. It was one of the areas that the Dongfu sect neglected. The deacons and core disciples of the sect did not plan to go to the Blue Cloud Mountains. In the end, under the arrangement of the perfected being elder, Du Bianqing, an inner disciple, led a team to the Blue Cloud Mountains to investigate. Du Bianqing wasn't an ordinary inner disciple. He was the #1 inner disciple of the Dongfu sect. Like Zi Chuanyu, he was also one of the top inner disciples of the Dongfu sect. Moreover, even though they were both key candidates, the extent of their training was different. In terms of talent, Du Bianqing was far more talented than Zi Chuanyu. Whether it was in terms of cultivation speed or aptitude, Du Bian City was far superior to Zi Chuanyu. Zi Chuanyu was a 7-star martial saint, Tian Ming. He became a martial saint at the age of 18, and a 2-star martial saint at the age of 19 and a half. He was 20 years old this year, and his cultivation was at the peak of the 2nd level of the astral vortex realm. His battle prowess was comparable to a 3-star martial saint. Du Bianqing was a 9-star martial saint, Tian Ming. He became a martial saint at the age of 16 and a half, a 2-star martial saint at the age of 17, and a 3-star martial saint at the age of 18. He was 19 this year, and his cultivation was at the peak of the 3rd level of the astral vortex realm. He had defeated a 4-star martial saint before. The difference between a level 3 martial saint and a level 4 martial saint was the difference between a beginner martial saint and a middle martial saint. However, Du Bianqing was able to defeat someone of a higher level than him. In terms of combat prowess, Du Bianqing was also far superior to Zi Chuanyu. When Du Bianqing was a 2-star martial sage, he could almost defeat a 3-star martial sage. Compared to Zi Chuanyu, who could only contend with a 3-star martial sage, the difference between them was obvious. In the Dongfu sect, Du Bianqing was known as the #2 genius among the disciples. Du Bianqing's identity was also extraordinary. He was the nephew of the Dongfu sect master, Du Bianxiong. His father was the perfected being elder of the Dongfu sect, Du Bianing. He was the perfected being elder who was investigating Zi Chuanyu's death. The reason why Du Bianing sent his son to the Blue Cloud Mountains was because he felt that the Blue Cloud Mountains should be safe. With Du Bianqing's strength, the Blue Cloud Mountains should be safe. The Blue Cloud Mountains. Yi Xing constantly used star crystals to recover his star essence. He maintained the speed of engraving the runes without slowing down or stopping. Today, Yi Xing felt very different when he was arranging the coiling snake array. Due to the sense of urgency in his heart, his mind was focused like never before. This was a level that was impossible to achieve under normal circumstances. This caused Yi Xing to increase the speed at which he set up the formation. Furthermore, his proficiency in formations also improved much faster than when he practiced in the past. Since Zi Chuanyu and the others were killed, the number of fierce beasts that rushed over had decreased. Most of the fierce beasts had turned around and left before they could reach here. Beasts had a keen sense of smell. Obviously, they knew that experts had died near the canyon and did not dare to come over. It was not until Yi Xing's coiling snake array was more than 50% complete, covering more than half of the canyon, that another strong enemy came. It was a level 2 demonic beast. As the saying goes, enemies meet on a narrow road. This was really true. The level 2 demonic beast that came was the winged flying snake that had fought with old Heir yesterday. At that time, the winged flying snake was hit by Yi Xing's arrow and fled far away. Yi Xing did not let old Heir chase after it. Now that a day had passed, the winged flying snake's injuries had healed. It had also sensed the aura of the star crystal spiritual milk and rushed here. When enemies met, their eyes would turn red. Old Heir and the winged flying snake fought as soon as they met. Yi Xing saw that the winged flying snake's injuries did not seem to have fully recovered. Old Heir could resist it, so he ignored it and focused on engraving the array runes. He wanted to complete the coiling snake array as soon as possible. As long as the coiling snake array was completed, Yi Xing would not care about an elementary martial sage. Although the coiling snake formation that Yi Xing had set up was an ordinary level 2 formation, it was a formation in the form of a formation base. As a level 2 formation, it was the strongest existence. It was far from comparable to the level 2 coiling snake formation in the form of a formation disc. It would not be difficult to kill a 3-star martial saint. This time, the winged flying snake and Old Hay fought fiercely for almost an hour before it was injured by Old Hay's claws. The new injury caused the old injury to flare up. With injuries on top of injuries, it fled again. During the battle between Old Hay and the winged flying snake, a team of 4 below the martial sage realm had come here. They observed from afar and chose to retreat, leaving far away. When the winged flying snake was defeated and left, Yixing's coiling snake array was 80% complete. It surrounded more than half of the canyon. When the coiling snake array was 90% complete, Yixing suddenly felt a fluctuation of star energy in the sky above the canyon. The scene above the canyon suddenly changed, turning into a starry sky. Among them, a star lit up and gradually grew bigger. It was a blue star. 80% of the star was endless water, forming a vast ocean. Yixing instantly realized that this was the awakening of astrology. Jianghu had reached the last step of breaking through to the star vortex realm. As long as astrology was awakened, the starlight cluster compressed by the 9 star rings in the dantian would rotate and form a starlight vortex. Then, one would step into the star vortex realm and be called a martial sage. No wonder junior martial sister Chu was able to cultivate water attribute martial arts so easily. So it turns out that her astrology is a water attribute star. Yixing muttered to himself as he looked at the vast ocean of blue stars. Jianghu's astrology was not awakened for long. In less than a quarter of an hour, it was completed. The illusion of astrology disappeared. At this time, Yixing had finished engraving the last array pattern. The coiling snake array was finally completed, covering the entire canyon. Now we don't have to worry about others snatching the star crystal spiritual milk, unless they are mid-level martial sages or second-level demonic beasts equivalent to mid-level martial sages. Yixing thought. Below the canyon, in the space between Jianghu's eyebrows, a blue water-based star was suspended in the starry sky. The starlight cluster in the dantian also slowly rotated the moment the astrology entered her body. Under the influence of the water-based astrology, Jianghu's star vortex looked like a water vortex. After breaking through to the star vortex realm, Jianghu stopped cultivating. Seeing that less than 1/3 of the star crystal spiritual milk in the pool had been consumed, she breathed a sigh of relief. After becoming a martial sage, Jianghu was in a good mood. She soon came to the top of the canyon. Senior brother Yi, it's time for you to cultivate. Have you finished setting up the array? Congratulations, junior sister Chu. Yixing nodded and congratulated Jianghu. There's no time to lose. Junior sister Chu, return to the sect on Old Black immediately and report the news. Oh, when you pass by Zishan County, inform Zishan Ho first. Okay. Senior brother Yi, be careful. Jianghu knew that the most important thing now was to report the news to the sect. She did not refuse and left on Old Black. With the coiling snake array, Yixing was no longer worried and came to the bottom of the canyon. It's been 3 days, but the monthly votes have not exceeded 200. What a tragedy. I hope to see the Archer God's monthly votes exceed 200 tomorrow. Otherwise, I will have to write a single chapter and beg desperately. I don't want to write a single chapter all the time, but if I don't write a single chapter, the brothers will not vote. Brother, do you vote? Chapter 194. At the bottom of the canyon, Yixing stood beside the star crystal spiritual milk, feeling very happy. After paying so much, it was finally time to reap the rewards. 2/3 of the star crystal spiritual milk was left in the pool, which was more than enough for him to become a martial saint. Yixing sat cross-legged beside the pool of star crystal spiritual milk. He quickly adjusted his state of mind, calmed his mind, and began to cultivate the pure yuan technique, absorbing the star crystal spiritual milk. Star crystal spiritual milk was the purest star power, which could be directly absorbed to improve one's cultivation without any impurities or side effects. The process of a martial artist breaking through to the star vortex realm and becoming a martial saint was to accumulate the power of the stars. This was a long process, but with the help of the star crystal spiritual milk, this long process could be shortened to a very short period of time. As Yixing cultivated the pure yuan technique, the star crystal spiritual milk in the pool was attracted by an invisible force, turning into a pure white qi flow and drilling into Yixing's body. Yi Xing's cultivation increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. Yi Xing had never experienced such a fast cultivation speed. His star essence conversion soon reached 50%. 50% conversion of celestial essence was the limit of a half-step martial saint. After that, Yi Xing cultivated the pure essence art. Although his inner strength could no longer be converted into celestial essence, the 9-star rings in his dantian gradually became brighter and brighter. When the 9-star rings shone to the extreme, they began to compress. For a martial artist with a low heaven's fate realm cultivation, this was an extremely difficult process, but Yi Xing was now doing it naturally. This had something to do with his astrology, but the star crystal spiritual milk was the main reason. Wisps of pure white qi flew out of the star crystal spiritual milk and were absorbed by Yi Xing's body. The 9-star rings in his dantian continued to compress, getting closer and closer. Soon, the 9-star rings would compress into a ball of starlight. At that time, he would usher in the final step of breaking through to the star vortex realm, which was also the most important step for martial artists, astrology awakening. That pillar of star force must have come from that canyon. There must be treasures inside. Senior Brother Gu, why did we retreat? Senior Brother Gu, you've cultivated the blood ghost eye, which can interfere with the thoughts of Class 2 demonic beasts. That black-feathered eagle and the winged flying snake are ordinary Class 2 demonic beasts, they can't threaten us. When Old Black and the winged flying snake's winged snake, the 4 martial artists who had appeared in the distance. Gu Yuyang was the main disciple of the Gu clan, which controlled the Blood Spectre sect. That was why he was able to cultivate the Blood Spectre eye when he was only a half-step martial saint. The Blood Ghost eye of the Blood Ghost sect was very effective in controlling demonic beasts. Gu Youyang's Blood Ghost eye had not reached the level of controlling demonic beasts, but it could influence the thoughts of demonic beasts. He could protect himself against demonic beasts. Gu Youyang was 17 or 18 years old, but he looked very mature. He sat on the back of the most powerful blue-winged eagle among the 4. He glanced at the 3 9th-level martial artists and said, "Let's go. Because I've cultivated the Blood Ghost eye, my eyesight is stronger than yours. That's why I had to retreat. There are not only corpses of fierce beasts around the canyon, but also the corpses of 5 martial saints in the grass. If we go there will only be one result, and that is death." What? Corpses of 5 martial saints? How is this possible? Could it be that those 5 martial saints couldn't even escape? Martial saints appeared in the Kuan-Yun mountain range? Which country's martial saints are they from? The 3 martial artists of LV9 exclaimed. Gu Youyang said, 2 of the martial saints were killed by arrows. As for the other 3, their deaths should also be related to arrows. You all ignored the young man who set up the formation beside the canyon. Although he is only a half-step martial saint, the arrow that killed the martial saints must have something to do with him. The 3 martial artists of LV9 were shocked. A half-step martial saint could kill a martial saint with arrows. This was absolutely shocking. Gu Youyang continued, I know one of the 5 dead martial saints. He's Zi Chuanyu, an inner disciple of the Falling Star sect. He came to the Blood Ghost sect before. Zi Chuanyu? I've heard of him. He's an inner disciple of the Dongfu sect. How could he die here? One of the martial artists of LV9 exclaimed. The Dongfu sect is an ally of the Blood Ghost sect. Shouldn't we tell them about Zi Chuanyu's death? That's right. We're close to the Dongfu sect. It won't take us more than a few hours on the Green-Winged Eagles. The other 2 martial artists of LV9 agreed. Gu Youyang nodded and agreed with the proposal. Thus, the 4 of them flew in the direction of the Dongfu sect. Before they left the Kuan-Yun mountain range, they bumped into Du Bianqing and the others who had come to investigate. Du Bianqing was the #1 inner disciple of the Dongfu sect. He was much more famous than Zi Chuanyu, so Gu Youyang naturally knew him. Senior brother Du Bianqing. Gu Youyang waved and shouted when he saw Du Bianqing and the others. You are? Du Bianqing was also riding on a green-winged eagle. Gu Youyang knew him, but he did not know Gu Youyang. The other 4 inner disciples of the Dongfu sect were riding on 2 green-winged eagles. They all looked at Gu Youyang. Gu Youyang controlled the green-winged eagle and quickly arrived in front of Du Bianqing and the others. He said, I'm Gu Youyang, the #1 outer disciple of the Blood Ghost sect. I saw the corpse of your inner disciple, Xianxia, in the Kuan-Yun mountain range. I'm on my way to inform you. The inner disciples of the Dongfu sect were shocked. Du Bianqing's eyes flashed and he raised his eyebrows. What? Junior brother, you died in the Kuan-Yun mountain range? That's right. Gu Yuyang nodded and told them what he had seen near the canyon. Du Bianqing heard that there was only a half-step martial sage setting up the formation and 2 ordinary LV2 demonic beasts fighting. He immediately waved his hand and shouted, "Let's go and see who killed junior brother Yu. I'll make sure he dies without a burial place." With Gu Yuyang and the other 3 leading the way, the 9 of them flew directly to the canyon where the star crystal lode was located. By the time the 9 of them arrived at the valley, Yi Xing had already finished setting up the formation and was cultivating beside the star crystal spiritual essence. Furthermore, the 9 rings in his dantian had already been compressed to the point where they were about to condense into a ball. He was close to awakening his star form. Outside the canyon, Blackie was no longer guarding. Yi Xing was at the bottom of the canyon, meditating and concentrating on breaking through to the star vortex realm. Therefore, it was quiet both inside and outside the canyon. The 9 of them flew above the canyon. Because of the formation, the void below was distorted, so they could not see the situation inside the canyon. The corpses of Zi Chuanyu, Yi Kong, and the other 4 were still beside the canyon, looking the same as when they died. When Du Bianqing and the others saw this, they were instantly enraged, especially Du Bianqing, who emitted a terrifying aura. Du Bianqing's eyes were as sharp as knives. He stared at the coiling snake formation that enveloped the canyon and shouted, "Break the formation! I'll avenge junior brother Yu and junior sister Kong. I'll tear that bastard into pieces." His voice was so loud that it penetrated the formation. Yi Xing, who was at the bottom of the canyon, heard it clearly. An angry roar suddenly rang out in the quiet environment. It almost disturbed Yi Xing's state of mind, almost causing him to wake up from the state where he was fully focused on breaking through to the star vortex realm. Fortunately, Yi Xing's superbrain reacted quickly and was calm enough. He calmed down in an instant. At this moment, no matter what happened outside, Yi Xing paid no attention to Yi Xing. He was fully focused on breaking through to the star vortex realm. Of the 4 inner disciples that Du Bianqing brought with him, 1 was a 3-star martial sage, 1 was a 2-star martial sage, and 2 were 1-star martial sages. Hearing Du Bianqing's order, the 4 of them immediately got off the green winged eagle. They each took out a spiritual weapon and attacked the coiling snake formation fiercely. They did not have any talent in formations and could not tell the level of the coiling snake formation that Yi Xing had set up. However, according to their common sense, a half-step martial sage could not set up a powerful formation. Therefore, the 4 martial sages expected that their joint attack should be able to break the formation in an instant. However, reality greatly exceeded the expectations of the 4 martial saints. When their attacks landed on the coiling snake formation, the coiling snake formation did not instantly break. Instead, the void that was enveloped by the formation shook and suddenly twisted violently. More than 10 star power snakes rushed out from it and attacked the 4 martial sages. Every martial saint was attacked by several astral force snakes. Unknowingly, the god of archery has a 6th leader, Midnight Breeze. Thank you very much. Chapter 195. The counterattack of the formation depended on the strength of the attack. The 1-star martial sage had the weakest attack. Therefore, the 2 1-star martial sages were counterattacked by 3-star force snakes each. The 2-star martial sages were stronger than the 1-star martial sages, so they were counterattacked by 5-star force snakes. As for the 3-star martial sages, their attacks were obviously the strongest, so they were counterattacked by 7-star force snakes. Each star force snake was as thick as a bucket and more than 10 feet long. They were lifelike and contained extremely terrifying power. This sudden change shocked the 4 martial sages. They exclaimed in unison, "A grade 2 formation?" A grade 2 formation could kill a martial sage. Even the most ordinary grade 2 formation could kill a beginner martial sage. The cultivation of the 4 martial sages ranged from LV1 to LV3 celestial vortex realm. They were all beginner martial sages. Facing the counterattack of a grade 2 formation, they were shocked and even frightened. At this moment, The four martial sages operated their celestial essence with all their might and unleashed their strongest strength. They even used the power of astrology. In an instant, illusions of stars appeared in the sky above the four of them. They were all ordinary stars. Sword chi and saber radiance crisscrossed, fist shadows and palm prints bombarded. At the same time, the four martial sages launched their strongest counterattack against the star power serpent. Bang! 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 The fight between the four martial sages and the coiling snake formation ended in an instant. Four explosions sounded and the four martial sages retreated at the same time. The 2-star martial sages and 3-star martial sages kept retreating. The 3-star martial sages retreated 5 steps and the 2-star martial sages retreated more than 10 steps. They both spat out blood and were obviously injured. Obviously, the 3-star martial sages were only slightly injured. As for the 2-star martial sages, their faces were pale and they almost fell to the ground. They relied on their spiritual weapons to support themselves. As for the 2 1-star martial sages, they flew backward and spat out blood in the air. Although they faced the least amount of attacks, their strength was the weakest. They simply could not withstand the counterattack of the coiling snake formation. The 2 of them flew back dozens of meters before falling to the ground. They could no longer get up. They had suffered fatal injuries. In the blink of an eye, the attacks of the 4 martial saints and the counterattack of the coiling snake formation injured the 4 martial saints. 2 of them were even in danger of losing their lives. A grade 2 formation. Du Bianqing, Gu Yuyang, and the other 4 exclaimed in shock. Who would believe that a 16 or 17-year-old half-step martial sage could set up a grade 2 array? Du Bianqing gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. His fists were trembling, which showed how furious he was at the moment. He had come to avenge Zi Chuanyu, but before he could even see his enemy, another 4 inner disciples of the Dongfu sect were injured, and 2 of them were fatally wounded. How could he not be furious? He glared fiercely at Gu Yuyang. His meaning was obvious. Was this a formation set up by a young half-step martial sage? If it was a half-step martial sage who had studied formations for decades, it would be reasonable for him to set up a grade 2 formation. But how could a 16 or 17-year-old half-step martial sage have so much time to study formations other than cultivation? Du Bianqing knew how difficult formations were. Without years or even decades of hard work, how could one become a grade 2 formation master and set up a grade 2 formation? Gu Yuyang and the other 3 felt their hearts skip a beat when Du Bianqing stared at them. Gu Yuyang hurriedly explained, "Senior brother Du Bianqing, I saw the person who set up the formation. He is indeed a 16 or 17-year-old half-step martial sage. There is no one else other than him. I'm not lying." Du Bianqing snorted and raised his hand. A purple spear appeared in his hand. This was Du Bianqing's weapon, the purple feather spear. There were strong and weak inferior spiritual weapons, and the purple feather spear was one of the top weapons among them. Du Bianqing held the purple feather spear and jumped down from the back of the green winged eagle. He glanced at the lightly injured 3-star martial sages and said, "Save them. I'll break the formation." As he spoke, Du Bianqing tightened his grip on the spear and his aura exploded. Before he made a move, there was already a terrifying aura that could collapse mountains and tsunamis. It was obvious that Du Bianqing was going to make a strong attack. Purple chi from the east, sun-piercing spear radiance. After 3 breaths, Du Bianqing made a move. His aura had accumulated to the highest level and he performed a killing move of the sun-piercing spear technique. Sun-piercing purple radiance. In the blink of an eye, all his aura and power were condensed in the spear. The spear radiance burst out and emitted a purple brilliance. Du Bianqing moved the purple feather spear in his hand and stabbed it at the snake coiling formation. The spear radiance was like a purple rainbow that streaked across the void. It seemed that even the sun in the sky would be pierced by this spear. In an instant, the purple spear radiance pierced the void enveloped by the snake coiling formation. Break! There was a cracking sound. A crack was torn in the void of the formation. Moreover, the crack was spreading in all directions at an extremely fast speed as if it would be completely pierced by the spear. A 3-star martial sage, a 2-star martial sage, and 2 1-star martial sages had joined forces to attack the coiling snake formation, but they had not been able to destroy it at all. Now that Du Bianqing had attacked, he had torn the coiling snake formation apart with one spear. This showed that Du Bianqing's strength was so strong that the other four martial sages' joint attacks were far inferior to his. Although Du Bianqing was strong, the snake coiling formation was a second-level formation. It could not be broken by his spear. The moment the void of the formation was torn, the snake coiling formation immediately launched a counterattack. In an instant, a total of 18 star power snakes rushed out of the snake coiling formation and attacked Du Bianqing's spear. Bang! In the blink of an eye, one of the star power snakes was destroyed by Du Bianqing's spear radiance. At the same time, Du Bianqing's spear radiance was forcibly broken by the 18 snakes. The collision between the two sides resulted in mutual damage. When 6 star power snakes were destroyed by the spear radiance, the rest of the spear radiance was also shattered by the numerous star power snakes and turned into nothingness. In the blink of an eye, there were still 12 star power snakes that came into direct contact with the purple feather spear. The power contained in the purple feather spear was more than twice as strong as the spear radiance's attack. It was almost unstoppable. Wherever the tip of the spear passed, the star power snakes were completely destroyed one by one. The purple feather spear pierced and destroyed the star power snakes in the blink of an eye. When there was only one star power snake left, the power of the purple feather spear was finally exhausted. The last star force serpent forced Du Bianqing to take 3 steps back before it was destroyed by Du Bianqing's second burst of celestial essence. If it had been a second-level coiling snake array in the form of an array disc, Du Bianqing's spear would have been enough to destroy it. Unfortunately, it was a second-level coiling snake array in the form of an array base. Even someone as strong as Du Bianqing could not break it in one breath. By the time Du Bian City unleashed the second wave of celestial essence and destroyed the last snake, the crack in the coiling snake array had already closed up. In the blink of an eye, another 18 snakes made of celestial essence appeared and attacked Du Bian City. Du Bianqing could not circulate his star power and immediately retreated 100 meters in the blink of an eye, avoiding the attacks of the 18 star power snakes. The first strike had almost completely broken the coiling snake array, but in the end, it had failed. Each base of the coiling snake array was powered by star crystals. Unless the array was broken in an instant, the energy consumed by the array would be instantly replenished. Unless the energy was exhausted, the array could not be broken. However, Du Bianqing, who had suffered the first setback, was not discouraged. Instead, his fighting spirit soared and he once again erupted with terrifying power. Moreover, this time, the scene above Du Bian City changed. A huge illusory star appeared. It was a pure golden planet. It was a pure metal star with the metal attribute. Du Bianqing's astrology was definitely different from that of ordinary people. It was much stronger than most people's astrology. Metal focused on killing. With a metal attribute astrology, any attack would contain powerful lethality, greatly increasing a cultivator's strength. As soon as Du Bianqing used the power of his astrology, his strength skyrocketed. It was in this state that he had defeated a 4-star martial saint once. Whoosh! Du Bianqing stabbed out with the purple feather spear in his hand. It was another purple sun-piercing. It was the same person and the same move, but because he used the power of his astrology, the power was completely different. Hiss! This time, there was almost no suspense. The entire coiling snake array was broken with one spear. The 18 star power serpents that had just appeared were instantly annihilated by this spear. The coiling snake array was broken. However, just as Du Bianqing was about to charge into the canyon, the sky suddenly darkened. When will the monthly votes exceed 200? I've been looking forward to it. Brothers, if it's not 200 yet, let's cast a few votes and get 20 votes today. Chapter 196. The sky darkened abruptly and completely. Just a moment ago, it was still bright and sunny. However, in the blink of an eye, the entire world had turned pitch black. It was so dark that one couldn't even see their own fingers. The day had suddenly turned darker than the night. This had never happened in the star continent. Du Bianqing, who was about to rush into the canyon, was shocked. All the hair on his body stood on end and he didn't dare to act rashly. Du Bianqing immediately circulated his celestial essence to protect his body. The purple feather spear also took a defensive stance to protect his body. At this moment, Du Bianqing wasn't the only one who felt the world turn dark. Instead, it was the entire star continent. Everyone within the endless territories felt the world turn dark. They couldn't even see their own fingers if they stretched out their hands. It was as if the entire star continent had suddenly turned from day to night. Whether it was mortals, martial artists, the weak, or the strong, everyone's heart skipped a beat at this moment. Everyone was shocked. Even the venerables and kings were shocked. They didn't know what had happened. Why had the bright day suddenly turned into pitch-black night? Darkness had shrouded the entire star continent. Yi Xing, who was in the midst of his astrology awakening, didn't know this. He only sensed a starry sky. Then, the entire starry sky was shrouded by an incomparably huge dark star. In the past, Yi Xing had only sensed the rough outline of this dark star. However, this time he clearly sensed the specific shape of this dark star. To be exact, Yi Xing didn't know if his astrology awakening was a star. He had seen many martial sages use the power of astrology, and the astrology awakening was a solid spherical star. However, although his astrology awakening was also in the shape of a star, it wasn't solid. There was a hole in the center. Moreover, the stars that Yi Xing saw in other people's astrology awakening seemed to be solid. However, his astrology awakening wasn't. The dark star rotated slowly with the hole in the center as its center. Yi Xing could clearly sense the rotating patterns and was sure that this was a dark vortex. As for the hole in the center of the dark vortex, it was so dark that it was impossible to see or even sense any objects or colors. Yi Xing quickly recalled that when he was severely injured by Dong Xianing and fell into a coma, his consciousness had been trapped in this dark vortex. So this really was his astrology. This kind of astrological sign was really strange. It was said that astrological signs were all stars, but his astrological sign was a dark vortex. This reminded him of the name of a celestial body on Earth: black hole. He didn't know if the star continent had the term black hole, but based on his knowledge of martial arts, Yi Xing really couldn't recognize what kind of astrology this black vortex was. Yi Xing called it the black hole astrology. Yi Xing was the only one who could sense the black hole astrology. The other martial artists could not sense it. Even the people in Dubian City who were very close to Yi Xing couldn't sense the awakening of Yi Xing's astrology at all. They couldn't even sense the fluctuation of star power. They could only feel that the world was pitch black. When Wei Qingxuan's astrology awakening, countless martial saints and perfected persons in the Qingyun region felt the fluctuation of star power. However, Yi Xing's astrology awakening didn't have any fluctuation of star power. The black hole astrology rotated slowly. There wasn't any fluctuation of star power. Instead, the power of the stars in the endless void was absorbed by the black hole astrology and gathered above Yi Xing, pouring into Yi Xing's body through the top of his head. This feeling was like being enlightened. Yi Xing's spirit was refreshed. Then, the endless star power and star power were instinctively absorbed by Yi Xing. The celestial essence in his body grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. Yi Xing cultivated the spirit martial inheritance, the pure Yuan art. The celestial essence cultivated was extremely pure and strong. It required a huge amount of star power to cultivate a trace of pure celestial essence. However, when the black hole astrological manifestation awakened, it absorbed too much star force, as well as a massive amount of star origin qi of higher quality. Naturally, the celestial essence within Yi Xing's body grew at an extreme speed. Every second, the celestial essence in Yi Xing's body would change greatly. In just a quarter of an hour, Yi Xing's internal strength had been completely transformed into celestial essence. Originally, when a half-step martial sage became a one-star martial sage, it would take a period of time to completely transform the internal strength in the body into celestial essence. Only then could one continue to cultivate, improve the quantity and quality of celestial essence, and continue to improve their cultivation. But now, Yi Xing was only at the stage of astrology awakening. He had completed the steps that only one-star martial sages could complete. Moreover, his cultivation was rapidly improving. Half an hour later, Yi Xing's celestial essence had filled the meridians of his body. 3/4 of an hour later, Yi Xing's celestial essence had integrated into his flesh and blood. 40/4 of an hour later, Yi Xing's celestial essence had entered his bone marrow and reached his skin. In other words, in just half an hour, Yi Xing's celestial essence had reached every part of his body. This was a level that only one-star martial sages could achieve. This meant that once Yi Xing's cultivation broke through to the celestial vortex realm, he would be at the peak of celestial vortex realm level 1. He would be a one-star martial sage. From the initial stage of 1-star martial sage to the peak of 1-star martial sage, even if one had the mandate of martial sage, it would take 1 year or even several years to achieve it. Only a few geniuses could shorten the time to 1 year, but it would still take several months. However, Yixing had not completely broken through to the celestial vortex realm. He was only at the stage of astrology awakening, but he had already achieved it. After half an hour, the black hole vortex in the starry sky had become extremely clear. Except for the black hole in the center of the vortex, which Yixing could not see or feel, he could clearly sense the entire black hole astrology. Yixing guessed that his astrology awakening had succeeded and should be completed soon. The last step of astrology awakening was to absorb the entire astrology awakening into the space between the eyebrows. From then on, the cultivator would be able to use the power of the astrology awakening at will. However, the black hole astrology above Yixing did not fall into the space between his eyebrows. Instead, in the part of the starry sky that was almost occupied by the black hole astrology, another star lit up. Then, a second star, a third star. What's going on? Yixing was shocked. The awakening of the black hole astrology was already beyond his understanding. The current situation was once again beyond his expectations. Could it be another astrology awakening? My astrology awakening is not only the black hole astrology, but also other astrology awakening? But how can a person have 2 astrology awakening? Yixing could not help but think. The conjecture in his heart almost made him scream out loud. 2 astrology awakening? This was too unbelievable. Even Yixing himself felt that this was too absurd. Although his martial arts cultivation was not high and his knowledge was limited, he still knew the common sense. Although the astrology awakening was different, everyone's astrology awakening was unique. This was something that Xianxia had told him before. If he had 2 astrology awakening, this would completely break the common sense of martial arts. Yixing could explain the black hole astrology awakening by saying that it was an astrology that he did not know of. How could he explain having 2 astrology awakening? Soon, Yixing confirmed that he had indeed awakened a second astrology awakening. Moreover, his second astrology awakening was a multi-star astrology awakening. In the starry sky, stars awakened one after another, becoming bright and resplendent. They occupied half of the starry sky, competing with the black hole astrology awakening. After a full hour, Yixing's second astrology awakening was finally complete. Countless stars in the starry sky connected to form a complete shape, a bow. This was a huge bow formed by countless stars. It was incomparably huge, competing with the incomparably huge black hole astrology awakening. Each of them occupied half of the starry sky. The arrow on the huge bow was extremely long, extending far out of the bow. The bowstring leaned against the black hole astrology, while the arrow pointed in the other direction. This is the Sagittarius constellation astrology awakening? Yixing felt the bow and arrow astrology awakening in the starry sky. His heart was filled with shock. Regarding the multi-star astrology awakening, there was no record of it in the martial arts manuals that Yixing had read. These were all things that Xianxia had mentioned to him before. Although Xianxia was a martial saint, he was very knowledgeable. Many enlightened masters were not as knowledgeable as him. When he talked to Yixing about the multi-star astrology awakening, he had specifically mentioned the Sagittarius constellation astrology awakening. According to Xianxia, the constellation astrology awakening was the strongest astrology awakening among the multi-star astrology awakening. It was also the strongest astrology awakening. And the Sagittarius constellation astrology awakening was undoubtedly the strongest astrology awakening for archers. The constellation astrology awakening was the strongest astrology awakening, but the 2 stars that Yixing had awakened just happened to occupy half of the starry sky. They were evenly matched, and no one occupied half more. From this, it could be seen that the black hole astrology awakening was not inferior to the Sagittarius constellation astrology awakening. If it was divided according to the single-star astrology awakening and the multi-star astrology awakening, the black hole astrology awakening should be classified as a single-star astrology awakening. But how could a single-star astrology awakening compete with the strongest astrology awakening? Yixing felt that his martial arts knowledge had been completely disrupted. Even what Xianxia said was not the truth. The Sagittarius constellation astrology awakening and the black hole astrology awakening stood side by side in the starry sky. However, because of the darkness caused by the black hole astrology awakening, no one in the entire star mainland was able to see Yi Xing's Sagittarius constellation astrology awakening. Even Du Biancheng and the others, who were the closest to Yi Xing, had never expected that the sudden darkness was actually caused by Yi Xing's awakening of his astrology. None of the martial artists in the entire star mainland would have thought that the darkness that enveloped the entire star mainland was actually related to someone's awakening. Following the complete awakening of the Sagittarius constellation astrology awakening, the entire starry sky began to fall. It was instinctively absorbed into the space between Yi Xing's eyebrows. The space between Yi Xing's eyebrows turned into a starry sky. However, it was occupied by a bow and arrow and a dark vortex, one on the left and one on the right. The two astrology awakening were evenly matched. Both astrology awakening were absorbed into the space between Yi Xing's eyebrows. Yi Xing's awakening astrology awakening was complete. The starlight in his dantian began to revolve, turning into a vortex. Because of the black hole astrology, Yi Xing's vortex was also pitch black. It was a different kind of black hole vortex. I'm home. I've been tired from traveling for 2 days. I'll sleep early tonight and rest. I'll make up for it tomorrow. I'll continue to ask for monthly votes. Chapter 197. In the center of the starland, there was a huge palace floating in the void. Sitting on the throne was a middle-aged man with a towering figure and wearing a green dragon robe. He was the current supreme king of the Great Yuan dynasty, Meng Tai. The sky turned from dark to bright. The paramount king, Meng Tai, stood up from his throne. His figure was extremely tall. Just now, the heaven and earth changed. The day was bright, and the world was bright. Suddenly, the night was shrouded in darkness. Why was that? Is there anyone among you who knows? The paramount king Meng Tai's eyes shone brightly as he swept his gaze across the many experts in the hall. The experts in the palace were all heroes of the current era. They could be the leaders of a sect or the overlords of a region. However, when faced with the gaze of the supreme king Meng Tai, all of them lowered their heads and did not dare to look him in the eye. The heaven and earth changed, and the heroes did not know why. The supreme king Meng Tai's gaze turned towards a black-robed old man with white eyebrows. Imperial Preceptor Sikong, you're good at deduction and divination. You understand the changes of the sun, moon and stars, and you understand the mysteries of the universe. Do you know the reason for the change in the world just now? In the Great Yuan dynasty, there was more than one imperial advisor. However, there was only one imperial advisor, Sikong Yen, who was the first imperial advisor. When Sikong Yen was called out by the supreme king Meng Tai, his eyebrows twitched slightly. He took a step forward and bowed. Your Majesty, just now when it was dark, this subject had a divination, but the result is not clear. This subject does not dare to make a conclusion. The supreme king Meng Tai stared at Sikong Yen for a while and said, with Imperial Preceptor Sikong's divination technique, how could it not be clear since there's already a result? You don't have to have any misgivings. Just speak your mind. Sikong Yen hesitated. The face of the supreme king Meng Tai froze, exuding a dignified aura. Sikong Yen immediately knelt on the ground and said, Your Majesty, according to my calculations, the change in heaven and earth just now is an ominous sign for the Great Yuan dynasty. In less than 10 years, the Great Yuan dynasty's 10,000 years of foundation will. At this point, Sikong Yen's breathing quickened. He didn't dare to continue. Everyone's eyes were focused on Sikong Yen. Although Sikong Yen didn't finish his sentence, they could all guess that it wasn't anything good. The utmost king Meng Tai narrowed his eyes and asked, What will happen? Just say it, and I'll pardon you. Sikong Yen took a deep breath and said, It will all be destroyed. What? Everyone in the hall was stunned. Although they had guessed that what Sikong Yen didn't dare to say was definitely not something good, they didn't expect it to be so serious. As the supreme ruler of the Star Continent, the Daryuan dynasty had been passed down for 10,000 years, and its foundation was extremely strong. Even if a calamity descended and its foundation was on the verge of collapse, its destruction wasn't something that could be accomplished in a single day. Especially the current utmost king of the Daryuan dynasty, Meng Tai, who had inherited the legacy of his ancestors and was extremely powerful. He swept across the star continent and was almost invincible. His lifespan was only 400 years, which was in the prime of his life. The Daryuan dynasty also produced many outstanding people and was extremely powerful. Under the governance of the utmost king, Meng Tai, it was a scene of prosperity and prosperity. There was almost no reason for it to be defeated. Even if it was defeated, it would take hundreds of years. As for its destruction, it should be after the utmost king, Meng Tai, passed away. It would take at least 500 to 600 years. How could the Daryuan dynasty be destroyed in a single day after 10 years? This was unbelievable. A bunch of nonsense. Deluding the crowd with lies. The Daryuan dynasty is like the sun in the sky. How could it be destroyed in a single day after 10 years? Many of the heroes in the hall shouted angrily and criticized Si Kongyan. However, they obviously did not pay attention to Si Kongyan's words. Si Kongyan did not say that the Daryuan dynasty would be destroyed in a single day after 10 years, but within 10 years. Within 10 years, it could be 3 to 5 years, or it could be 7 to 8 years. The longest was 10 years. It was no wonder that although Si Kongyan had deduced the fate of the Daryuan dynasty, he did not dare to say it just now. When he said it, it was indeed shocking and caused him to be reprimanded. Especially the utmost king, Meng Tai, who was furious when he heard it. He was one of the strongest utmost kings in the history of the Daryuan dynasty. He wanted to develop the Daryuan dynasty to an even more powerful stage. How could he believe that the Daryuan dynasty would be destroyed in a single day after 10 years? As the utmost king of the Daryuan dynasty, if he was still alive, how could the Daryuan dynasty be destroyed? On the other hand, if the Daryuan dynasty was destroyed in a single day after 10 years, wouldn't it mean that he, the utmost king, only had 10 years to live? Meng Tai thought that it was impossible. He was almost invincible in the star continent. Who could kill him? If Meng Tai was a fatuous ruler, Si Kongyan would probably die an unnatural death after saying what he said. Of course, since Si Kongyan dared to say that, Meng Tai was naturally not a fatuous ruler. Since the utmost king, Meng Tai, did not believe Si Kongyan's words, the anger in his heart dissipated quickly. He said, "Imperial advisor Si Kong, I know that you are proficient in the art of deduction and are loyal to the Daryuan dynasty. However, there are always times when people make mistakes. No wonder you said that the outcome was not clear. It seems that there was indeed a mistake. Next time, don't speak carelessly. The fate of the Daryuan dynasty is at its peak and will only become stronger and stronger. Even if there is a time when it will be destroyed, it will definitely be after I pass away. How could it be defeated by me?" Although the utmost king, Meng Tai, was talking about Si Kongyan, he was actually confirming his own confidence. A year ago, Imperial advisor Si Kong, you deduced that the demon star would wreak havoc and threaten the foundation of the Daryuan dynasty. However, the demon star was eliminated as soon as it was born. Who else can wreak havoc in the dynasty? The Dark Star sect? I doubt they have the ability to do so. Seeing that the utmost king, Meng Tai, and the other heroes did not believe him, Si Kongyan sighed in his heart. He was very confident in his deduction skills. However, it was a pity that no one believed him. He could not say too much. If he said too much, he might really anger the utmost king, Meng Tai, and his life would be in danger. Si Kongyan said, "Your Majesty is right. It was indeed my mistake." The utmost king Meng Tai nodded his head. "Get up. Imperial advisor, you don't have to worry about a mistake. In the future, I will have to trouble you to continue to contribute to the Daryuan dynasty." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Si Kongyan got up. There were two thoughts intertwining in his mind. One was to protect himself and pretend to be deaf and dumb. Even if the fate of the Daryuan dynasty was about to be destroyed, he could only bury this news in his stomach. The other was to continue to talk about it and let the utmost king, Meng Tai, take this matter seriously. This was because the utmost king, Meng Tai, really valued him very much. This made him want to risk his life to serve the Daryuan dynasty. Of course, after thinking about it, the first thought prevailed. His own life was the most important. Clang! At this moment, there was a sudden rush of a bell from outside the hall. The faces of everyone in the hall changed. The bell had a special meaning. If it was not a major event, as if the sky was falling, the bell would not have rung so urgently. When the bell stopped ringing, a person rushed into the hall and knelt down before the utmost king, Meng Tai. Your Majesty, when the sky was dark, the ancestral mausoleum split open and the dragon vein collapsed. The fate of the Daryuan dynasty, which had accumulated for 10,000 years, dissipated. What? The utmost king, Meng Tai, shouted angrily. His face was instantly covered with a layer of murderous intent. All the heroes in the hall changed their expressions. The ancestral mausoleum and the dragon vein were the symbols of the Daryuan dynasty's fate. Fate, in particular, affected the rise and fall of the dynasty. Now that there was a problem, it was an extremely ominous sign. In an instant, everyone's eyes gathered on Si Kongyan. Previously, they thought that Si Kongyan was talking nonsense to mislead the crowd. But now, the facts had proven that Si Kongyan's words were not false. The utmost king, Meng Tai, was livid. But soon, his expression returned to normal. He did not show his emotions on his face as he looked at Si Kongyan. Imperial advisor Si Kong, I have wronged you. Tell me, who is the one who is causing trouble and wants to destroy the foundation of our dynasty? Si Kongyan bowed slightly and said, Your Majesty, I think that the fiend star might not be dead. The one who is causing trouble is the fiend star who descended on the star continent a year ago. The utmost king, Meng Tai, said coldly, The fiend star is not dead? In the entire star continent, all those with the surname Yi who were born in those 3 days have been eliminated. Why is the fiend star not dead? Si Kongyan said, Your Majesty, the star continent is so vast. There are countless families with the surname Yi. There are even many families with the surname Yi. How can we investigate them all? There are bound to be some that slip through the net. Furthermore, I have been thinking for the past year. The fiend star might not have been born in the star continent. Your Majesty, do you still remember what happened 2,000 years ago? The utmost king, Meng Tai, nodded. Are you saying that someone came directly from another world? How should we deal with it? Si Kongyan said seriously, I have 2 ideas. Chapter 198. The Supreme King Meng Tai nodded. Speak. Si Kongyan said, The first method is to ignore him. Although Fiend Star can threaten the foundation of the Great Yuan dynasty in the future, as long as there is no enmity with him, he may not necessarily be the enemy of the Great Yuan dynasty. Hearing this, the Supreme King Meng Tai frowned. If he has the strength to destroy the foundation of our dynasty, how can he not replace us? We can't ignore him. We must find Fiend Star. As long as Fiend Star is alive, I won't be at ease. Si Kongyan had already expected that the Supreme King Meng Tai would say this. Even he himself did not agree with the first method, so he said, According to my prediction, the demon star is lush and full of vigor. Even if he wasn't born in the star continent and came from another world, he should still be a young man who is growing up. As the demon star in this chaotic world, he must grow up very fast. His strength must be far beyond ordinary people. He must be a genius. Si Kongyan's lips curled up slightly, and he continued, The extraterritorial star continent will open in about 3 years. Your Majesty can use this as an excuse to hold a genius selection competition in the entire star continent. First it will be held in each domain, then in each continent. The top contestants of each domain will participate. Finally, it will be held by the dynasty. The top contestants of each continent will participate. Every genius selection competition will be held a little longer to give Fiend Star enough space to grow. In this way, Fiend Star will definitely be one of the top contestants in every genius selection competition. Finally, he will come before your Majesty. As long as you know who Fiend Star is, you can kill him before he grows up. There will be no more worries. The Supreme King Meng Tai nodded and said, This is a good idea. However, how will I know which genius is Fiend Star? The number of outstanding geniuses in the entire star continent is not small. If I were to kill all of them, there would definitely be complaints everywhere. Furthermore, the Dark Star sect has always been eyeing my Great Yuan dynasty covetously, so I cannot do something that would cause people to lose their support. Even a year ago, the Great Yuan dynasty had secretly killed the baby with the surname Yi. Now, It was naturally impossible for them to kill all the genius juniors in the entire Starland. Every single genius represented the hope of a certain force. Killing one or two would be fine, but if too many were to be killed, then all the forces in the entire Starland would be in a state of panic, and complaints would be raised against the Great Yuan dynasty. At this moment, if the enemies of the Great Yuan dynasty raised their arms and called for help, all the forces of the Starland would unite to overthrow the Great Yuan dynasty. It would definitely be a disaster for the Great Yuan dynasty. Therefore it was fine to kill one, but not all. Xianxia said, "Your Majesty, there is no need to worry. I have my ways to find the demon star." As he spoke, Xianxia waved his hand, and some starlight sand floated in front of him, finally transforming into the shape of a bow and arrow. Xianxia continued, "The darkening of the sky and earth just now was related to Fiend Star. It should have been when Fiend Star's identity was exposed. However, when I made a divination, I discovered that there was a force that concealed the secrets of heaven. I didn't manage to divine Fiend Star's identity, but I managed to divine a bow and arrow. From this, it can be seen that Fiend Star is definitely related to bows and arrows. He should be an expert archer in the future." The Supreme King Meng Tai's eyes lit up. If that's the case, Fiend Star must be among the geniuses who use bows and arrows. Good. Good. There aren't many martial artists who practice archery, and even fewer geniuses. Even if I were to kill all the geniuses who use bows and arrows, it wouldn't cause too much of a reaction. Xianxia said, "Your Majesty's purpose for holding the genius election is to find Fiend Star. Therefore, we can't be too hasty. First, we have to spread the news and let everyone know. 1 year later, each domain will hold the first selection. 2 years later, each continent will hold the second selection. 3 years later, when the extraterritorial Starland is about to open, the dynasty will hold the third selection. In this way, Fiend Star will have enough time to grow and shouldn't miss this selection. Moreover," Xianxia emphasized, "Your Majesty, this genius selection must really be a selection of geniuses. The last selection must be held in the Starry Sky Arena, so that the geniuses who win will have the opportunity to enter the extraterritorial Starland. Otherwise, if Fiend Star's guardians realize that the true purpose of the genius selection is not to select geniuses, our efforts will be in vain. At that time, even if we kill all the geniuses who use bows and arrows, we may not be able to eliminate Fiend Star." The Supreme King Meng Tai thought for a moment and waved his hand. Approved. Yixing obviously did not expect that the first time he came to the Star Mainland, he would attract the attention of the Grand Yuan dynasty's imperial tutor, Xianxia, who had designated him as Fiend Star. This time, the awakening of the astrology had once again attracted the attention of Xianxia. He had even set up a genius selection for him, with the goal of finding out who Fiend Star was. Furthermore, Xianxia had almost figured out Fiend Star's identity during the awakening of the astrology. Fortunately, the black hole astrology had concealed the heavenly mystery, preventing Xianxia from figuring out Fiend Star's identity. He had only figured out a bow and arrow. As a result, Xianxia only knew that it was related to Fiend Star's bow and arrow. However, he did not know that this bow and arrow was one of Fiend Star's astrology. At the bottom of the canyon in Kuan-Yun mountain range, Yixing opened his eyes. There was a smile at the corner of his mouth, and he was in a very good mood. He had finally realized his initial dream when he first came to the Star Mainland, to become a martial sage. Furthermore, there were still 3 days before he arrived at the Star Mainland. It was only a year. In other words, his goal of becoming a martial sage within a year had been achieved. After becoming a martial sage, Yixing could feel the powerful force in his body. It was more than 10 times stronger than when he was a half-step martial sage. Every part of his body, whether it was his meridians, flesh, bones or skin, contained a rich amount of pure star essence, which meant that his cultivation had reached the peak of the first-level star vortex realm. Although Yixing's physical body was exactly the same as when he was a half-step martial sage, which was the strength of the complete invincible golden body, now that his skin and flesh contained pure star essence, the defensive power of his physical body was much stronger than when he was a half-step martial sage. Compared to the integration of star essence into his flesh and blood, any top-grade body refining cultivation technique was not worth mentioning at all. Yixing scanned his body with the superbrain and suddenly found something in his mind. It was a ball of crimson flames, but there were 2 clusters of flames. He had a feeling that his body seemed to be related to this red flame, but he did not know what kind of flame it was. At the same time, Yixing was surprised. Why had he not noticed this red flame before, but now it had been scanned by the superbrain? Was it because he had become a martial sage that the superbrain had become stronger? Or was it because he had become a martial sage that the flame had appeared in his mind? Yixing could not figure it out for the time being. "Thief, how dare you kill!" As the world returned to normal, Du Bianqing recovered from his shock and immediately rushed to the edge of the canyon and shouted angrily. However, before he could finish his sentence, he saw the star crystal lode at the bottom of the canyon and the star crystal spiritual milk in front of Yixing. In an instant, Du Bianqing's scolding of Yixing was retracted and his tone turned into a cry of surprise. "Star crystal lode? Star crystal spiritual milk?" Following the exclamation from Du Bian City, the expressions of the other 8 people also brightened when they heard this. Star crystal lode? Star crystal spiritual milk? These were treasures that could only be found by chance. Star crystal lode was of great use to the sect, and star crystal spiritual milk was of great help to one's cultivation. Gu Yuyang and the other 4 disciples rushed to the edge of the canyon. Their eyes lit up when they saw the star crystal lode at the bottom of the canyon. The other 4 inner disciples of the East supporting sect also came to the edge of the canyon, supporting each other. Although the 2 one-star martial sages had suffered fatal injuries, they were treated in time and saved their lives. After 2 hours, their injuries had recovered a lot. Seeing the star crystal lode and star crystal spiritual milk at the bottom of the canyon, the other 8 people exclaimed. Compared to the value of the lode and star crystal spiritual milk, avenging Zichuanyu was just a small matter. Seeing that Yixing had become a 1-star martial sage, Gu Yuyang immediately knew that Yixing had broken through to the star crystal spiritual milk at the bottom of the canyon. Looking at the 5 inner disciples of the Dongfu sect, Gu Yuyang knew that the 4 of them could not compete with the 4 martial sages for the star crystal spiritual milk. As for the star crystal lode, if they sent the news back to the sect as soon as possible, the Dongfu sect might be able to get a share of it and earn a lot of contribution points. Gu Yuyang immediately gestured to the other 4 disciples of the Dongfu sect, indicating that they should leave immediately. Whoosh! At this moment, a purple spear light suddenly streaked across the void and stabbed toward Gu Yuyang and the other 3. Chapter 199. The purple spear radiance blossomed like fireworks, incomparably beautiful. However, beauty and danger were often proportional. Gu Yuyang and the other 3 immediately felt a fatal danger. Poof! 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 3 flowers of blood blossomed as the purple spear radiance pierced through the throats of the 3 rank 9 martial artists in the blink of an eye. Du Bianqing had killed martial artists below the martial sage realm with ease. His opponents had no chance to retaliate. As for the half-step martial sage Gu Yuyang, he also had no chance to retaliate. However, Du Bianqing had thrown out an array disc, giving him a chance to catch his breath. As a direct descendant of the Gu clan, Gu Yuyang's status was obviously not ordinary. He was only a half-step martial sage, but the array disc he had thrown out was a grade 2 copper wall array. The second-level formation, the bronze wall formation, could completely defend against the attack of a beginner martial sage. Unfortunately, Gu Yuyang only threw out a formation plate instead of the bronze wall formation in the form of a formation plate. Therefore, the bronze wall formed by the formation was still pierced through by Du Bianqing's spear. Poof! Gu Yuyang was sent flying by the spear, blood splattering from his chest. Most of the spear's power had been blocked by the copper wall array. Although Gu Yuyang was heavily injured, he had not been killed instantly. The Blood Ghost sect and the Dongfu sect are allied forces. Why did you kill us? Gu Yuyang, who had fallen far away, covered the bleeding wound on his chest and shouted angrily at Du Bianqing. You wanted to go back and report to the Blood Ghost sect so that they could share the benefits of this star crystal lode. Don't you deserve to die? Du Bianqing was in a good mood. With a happy smile on his face, he stabbed his spear again, nailing Gu Yuyang to the ground. This star crystal lode belongs to the Dongfu sect. Du Bianqing stared at Gu Yuyang's corpse with a smile, but his voice was cold. At this moment, Yixing had already arrived at the other side of the canyon. He faced off against the 5 martial sages from Du Bian City and looked at them coldly. Du Bianqing wanted to silence him and the 4 Blood Spectre sect disciples, so that the East Fu sect could obtain the star crystal lode alone. Yi Xing also wanted the Falling Star sect to obtain the star crystal lode alone. Therefore, he wanted to capture the 5 martial saints in one fell swoop to prevent them from leaking the news. 2 1-star martial saints, 1 2-star martial saint, and 2 3-star martial saints. Yi Xing sized up Du Biancheng and the other martial sages and felt great pressure. These 5 people were much stronger than Zi Chuanyu's group. This was especially true for Du Biancheng, who was wielding the purple plume spear. His strength was not weaker than a 4-star martial sage. Even the coiling snake formation had been broken by his spear. He was very difficult to deal with. Now, Yi Xing had no outside help and could only rely on himself. The only thing he could rely on was the dual astrology he had awakened when he broke through to the celestial vortex realm. However, it was hard to judge the strength of his astral energy without going through an actual battle. While observing the 5 martial sages from Dubian City, Yi Xing naturally scanned them with his superbrain. A small discovery instantly lifted his spirits. Yi Xing also saw a ball of flame in the minds of the 5 martial saints. However, the color of the flames in their minds was different from his. They were all orange. Moreover, the size of their flames were different. The 2 1-star martial saints had 2 and 3 clusters of flames, the 2 2-star martial saints had 4 clusters of flames, and the 2 3-star martial saints had 6 and 9 clusters of flames, respectively. Red and orange? Yi Xing realized that the color of the heaven's will was very similar to the color of the blood fate stone. Moreover, Yi Xing was a 2-star heaven's will, which was the most common red life. The flames in his mind were red and there were 2 flames. Didn't this mean that he was a 2-star red life? As for the 5 martial saints, the 2 1-star martial saints had 2 and 3 flames respectively. This represented a 2-star orange life and a 3-star orange life. The 2-star martial saints had 4 flames, which represented a 4-star orange life. The 2 3-star martial saints had 6 and 9 flames respectively, which represented a 6-star orange life and a 9-star orange life. The more Yi Xing thought about it, the more he felt that his judgment was reliable. The flames in his mind should be the heaven's will, or the manifestation of the heaven's will. Others couldn't directly see the level of the heaven's will. Before Yi Xing became a martial saint, he couldn't see it either. It could be seen that after Yi Xing became a martial saint, the superbrain had become one with his brain and had evolved. After the evolution, the superbrain could scan the level of the heaven's will. This was an unexpected surprise. If others wanted to know the level of the heaven's will, they had to use the blood fate stone to test it. However, Yi Xing could directly scan it with his superbrain. No matter if it was his or someone else's will, he could see it with a glance. After killing Gu Yuyang and the other 3, Du Bianqing turned his fierce gaze to Yi Xing. His gaze was as sharp as a knife. After staring at Yi Xing for a few breaths, Du Bianqing said in a cold voice, "So it was you who killed junior brother Yu and the others?" Du Bianqing obviously recognized Yi Xing. The other 4 martial saints also recognized him. They were all from sects, so they naturally recognized Yi Xing, who was on the East Fujian sect's blacklist. Yi Xing nodded. "It was me." Du Bianqing stared at Yi Xing, as if he wanted to see Yi Xing's fear. Unfortunately, he failed. Yi Xing was still calm. "You relied on the star crystal spiritual essence to break through to the star vortex realm. Your cultivation isn't very high, but you have guts." Du Bianqing's voice was cold. Yi Xing's calm reaction in front of him made him very unhappy. Yi Xing nodded again. "That's right. Now I'm thinking about how to kill you." Ha ha ha. Du Bianqing was so angry that he laughed as if he had heard the funniest joke. "Without the formation, you are nothing but an ant. Senior brother Chung, let me capture this little thief alive. Senior brother Chung can torture him slowly to avenge junior brother Yu." Another 3-star martial saint said loudly. He had been injured by Yi Xing's coiling snake formation, so he hated Yi Xing to the core. Without the formation, Du Bianqing regarded Yi Xing as an ant. Naturally, he was too lazy to do it himself. The other 3-star martial saint, Zi Chuanjian, was the brother of Zi Chuanyu. It was reasonable for him to capture Yi Xing to avenge Zi Chuanyu. Du Bianqing nodded to Zi Chuanjian. "Junior brother Jian, don't worry about my opinion. Kill him however you want." "Okay." Zi Chuanjian's eyes were filled with excitement. As he spoke, Zichuanjian raised his hand. A long and narrow spiritual weapon appeared in his hand. He walked step by step toward Yixing. Zichuanjian stared at Yixing with murderous eyes and said word by word, "Boy, I will first cut off your arms, then your legs, then your head. You will die without a complete corpse." Yixing raised his hand. The spiritual inscription bow and the green sandalwood arrow appeared in his hands. He instantly knocked an arrow on the bow and said, "Your mind is too twisted. The fastest way to kill someone is to kill them with one shot. I only need one arrow to kill you. You, a mere one-star martial saint, want to hurt me with a bow and arrow?" Zichuanjian's voice was filled with disdain. He also did not take Yixing seriously. Yixing did not say anything else. He activated the stacking wave arrow technique to the limit. The stacking wave arrow technique had reached 18 layers. The higher the layers, the harder it was to stack each layer. 18 layers was already the limit of the stacking wave arrow technique. In an instant, the green sandalwood arrow had already left the bow and shot toward Zichuanjian. Whoosh! The arrow broke through the air and made a loud sound. Yixing was not far away from Zichuanjian. The arrow left the bow and was already in front of Zichuanjian. "Break!" Zichuanjian shouted. His speed suddenly increased and he slashed down with his saber, bringing out a dazzling white saber light. Clang! With a loud sound, the green sandalwood arrow was sent flying. A 3-star martial saint's strength was not to be underestimated. Yixing was confident that this arrow was enough to kill a 2-star martial saint. However, it was still sent flying by Zichuanjian's saber. However, Zichuanjian did not feel good after sending the green sandalwood arrow flying. With that loud sound, the spiritual weapon in his hand trembled and buzzed. His forward speed suddenly came to a halt. The terrifying power almost made him take a step back. At this moment, his heart was incomparably shocked. A mere 1-star martial saint's arrow was actually so powerful. It was really shocking. If the arrow hit his body, Zichuanjian's celestial essence would not be able to defend him. If the arrow hit his vital points, he would definitely be killed. "Damn it!" Zichuanjian roared. In an instant, the scene in the sky changed. A huge star appeared and he used the power of astrology. Although his astrology did not have any attributes, it was much bigger than the barren stars of ordinary martial saints. The star force that fell was more vigorous, causing his strength to increase by several times. Whoosh! Zichuanjian, who used the power of astrology, was as fast as lightning. In an instant, he rushed in front of Yixing. Chapter 200. When Zichuanjian rushed over, Yixing shot another arrow. However, Zichuanjian, who had used the power of the astrology, was much more powerful and easily split the arrow apart. In the blink of an eye, the spiritual weapon brought out a dazzling blade radiance and chopped down on Yixing's head. If the saber hit its target, it might not be able to split Yixing's body in half, but it would at least split his head in half. Since Zichuanjian had used the power of the astrology, Yixing did not plan to block him with the arrow. The superbrain had already scanned Zichuanjian's every move. Yixing had already predicted Zichuanjian's attack trajectory. Therefore, when the arrow left the bow, Yixing's body flashed and he used the cloud goose flight to quickly dodge to the side. The cloud goose flight was a top-grade lightness skill. Yixing's cloud goose flight had been cultivated to the transformation realm. Moreover, after he became a martial sage, he used his celestial essence and his speed was much faster than when he was a half-step martial sage. Although Zichuanjian's blade radiance was as fast as lightning, Yixing had already predicted it and dodged quickly. He successfully dodged the blade radiance. Whether it was Zichuanjian or the people in Dubian City who were not far away, they were all shocked. Obviously, they did not expect that Yixing could dodge Zichuanjian's lightness skill with just a top-grade lightness skill. What Zichuanjian had used was a spiritual martial lightness skill. Especially Zichuanjian's blade radiance skill. Even a martial sage who had cultivated a spiritual martial lightness skill would find it difficult to dodge. However, Yixing had used a top-grade lightness skill to dodge the attack. It was really shocking. Die! Zichuanjian's blade radiance skill did not hit Sumo and he became angry. He shouted loudly and the blade radiance swept out like a moon. Low-grade spiritual martial skill. Falling moon blade technique. Move. Half-moon dash. It was very difficult to cultivate a spiritual martial skill. Zi Chuanjian's falling moon blade technique had reached the small success stage and it was very fast. The saber swept towards Yi Xing as he dodged. A martial artist's attack speed far exceeded his movement speed. Hence, even if Yi Xing's speed was faster than a normal person's, it was still difficult for him to continuously dodge Zi Chuanjian's attacks. Even if Yi Xing was able to predict the enemy's movements, Zi Chuanjian's moves were too fast. By the time Yi Xing scanned the trajectory of Zi Chuanjian's attack, the other spirit weapon had already reached his waist. Unless Yi Xing was able to completely dodge out of the attack range of the spirit weapon blade in an instant. Otherwise, if he dodged in a small area, the opponent would be able to immediately change the trajectory of the attack and strike Yi Xing. After all, the strength of a 3-star martial sage was extraordinary. This saber strike had forced Yi Xing into a desperate situation. Black hole astrology. At this moment, Yi Xing immediately used the power of astrology. In an instant, the scene above his head changed and turned into a pitch-black whirlpool. In an instant, Zi Chuanjian's vision suddenly turned black. The whole world turned into darkness and he could not even see his fingers. The only thing he could see was a huge black whirlpool above him, which made his heart palpitate. This time, it was not the whole star continent that was shrouded in darkness. Only Zi Chuanjian felt the boundless darkness. Since he could not even see his fingers, how could Zi Chuanjian see Yi Xing? Naturally, he had become blind. What was more terrifying was that the black whirlpool in the sky seemed to have a strong devouring power. It made Zi Chuanjian feel that the star essence in his body was being forcibly sucked away and was about to leave his body. The sudden change made Zi Chuanjian's face turn pale. His heart was instantly filled with fear. The momentum of the saber strike suddenly weakened rapidly and its speed also stopped. When Yi Xing used the black hole astrology, he felt a little strange. He could feel every inch of space in all directions clearly. It was as if the darkness was his sense of touch. As long as it was in the darkness, there was nothing that he did not know. Seeing his opponent's momentum weaken and his speed stop, Yi Xing knew that his opponent had fallen into the darkness. He immediately leaned back. His legs were planted on the ground as if they were rooted. His body fell down and he immediately avoided the sweeping saber strike. Although it was said that he had avoided it, it was not completely avoided because Yi Xing's body was too close to the blade. As long as Zi Chuanjian could see it, he would have pressed the blade down slightly and it would still hit Yi Xing. Therefore, for a martial sage, such a dodge was almost useless. In the distance, Du Bianqing and the others did not feel the darkness of the black hole astrology. They only saw a black star suddenly appear above Yi Xing. It was blurry and they could only vaguely see the outline of it. They did not know what star it was. From their point of view, Yi Xing's dodging would only lead to his death. Zi Chuanjian pressed the blade down slightly and was about to slice off Yi Xing's stomach. However, to Du Bianqing and the others' surprise, Zi Chuanjian did not change the trajectory of the saber strike. The blade almost touched Yi Xing's clothes and cut above Yi Xing's stomach. The sharp saber qi even cut several cracks on Yi Xing's clothes on his stomach. However, Yi Xing's body was protected by the pure essence of the star essence. Moreover, his physical body had already cultivated the invincible golden body to the perfection realm. It was very tough. Even after being swept by the saber qi, he was not injured at all. Was Zi Chuanjian blind? Du Bianqing and the others were puzzled. However, what puzzled Du Bianqing and the others even more was yet to come. When the spirit weapon saber swept across Yi Xing's stomach, Yi Xing's body bounced back like a spring and his upper body instantly stood up. At the same time, a spiritual weapon short saber appeared in Yi Xing's hand. Whoosh! The spiritual weapon short saber instantly burst out a bright saber light and cut across the void. At the same time, Yi Xing took a step forward. His body suddenly rushed forward and the spiritual weapon short saber in his hand swept across Zi Chuanjian's neck. After the saber sweep, Zi Chuanjian suddenly retreated as if he could not see Yi Xing. However, when he retreated, Yi Xing advanced and did not pull away at all. The spiritual weapon short saber in Yi Xing's hand swept across Zi Chuanjian's throat in an instant. Not good. Du Bianqing and the others were shocked. Zi Chuanjian looked like he was really blind. He only knew how to retreat but did not know how to move his neck to avoid Yi Xing's attack. Yi Xing's attack on Zichuanjian's neck with the spiritual weapon short saber had no moves to speak of. It was just an ordinary slash. Logically speaking, Zichuanjian should not have been hit. However, the truth was that Zichuanjian's neck was instantly slashed with a deep wound. Blood spurted out and splattered out. Zichuanjian instantly let out a shrill scream. He covered his neck with one hand and waved the spiritual weapon saber in front of him in a flurry. However, Yi Xing had already circled around his body and stood behind him. Zichuanjian's attack was even aimed in the wrong direction. Naturally, it did not touch Yi Xing. The throat was a vital part of the human body. With a deep wound, Zichuanjian merely waved the spiritual weapon saber 5 or 6 times before his body fell backward and convulsed. He was already on the verge of death. Junior apprentice brother Jian. After Zichuanjian's throat was cut, while he was still waving the spiritual weapon saber in his hand, Du Bianqing roared and stabbed the purple quill spear in his hand towards Yi Xing. In an instant, a purple rainbow cut through the void and appeared in front of Yi Xing fast. The speed of this spear was so fast that Yi Xing could not even react in time. If Yi Xing had not paid attention to Du Bianqing, this spear would have already pierced his chest and killed him in one blow. However, even though Yi Xing had already expected this spear when Du Bianqing circulated his celestial essence and had already started to dodge, he still could not completely avoid this spear. Seeing that the purple quill spear was about to pierce his right chest, Yi Xing pushed the pure essence celestial essence in his body to the limit. The spiritual weapon short saber in his hand shone brightly and slammed against the spearhead, trying to push the spear away. Clang with a loud bang, the spiritual weapon short saber in Yi Xing's hand flew out in an instant and burst into the distance. The purple quill spear in Du Bianqing's hand only slightly deviated from its trajectory and brushed past Yi Xing's shoulder, leaving behind a bright red wound that bled profusely in an instant. That spear strike was simply too terrifying. It had almost killed Yi Xing with that strike. If this spear had pierced through his chest, Yi Xing would never have been able to escape from Du Bianqing's killing move. Even if Du Bianqing had merged into the darkness of the black hole astrology at this moment, he could no longer see Yi Xing's figure. Only a huge dark vortex in the sky. What the hell is this? Could it be that Yi Xing's astrology has the effect of making people fall into darkness, making people unable to see anything? Du Bianqing was shocked and his expression changed drastically. At this moment, he finally understood why Zichuanjian looked like he was blind. In this situation, the surroundings were so dark that he couldn't even see his own fingers. He was no different from a blind person. Du Bianqing's heart suddenly trembled. He immediately connected the current darkness with the darkness that he had felt earlier. He couldn't believe it. He immediately reacted. Gu Yuyang said that he was a half-step martial sage, but he is now a one-star martial sage and has an astrology that can make people blend into the dark world. Then, when the bright sun turned into darkness, could it be that his astrology had awakened? Although this was ridiculous, how could a person's astrology awaken cause the world to turn dark? Du Bianqing was very sure of his guess now that he was in the dark world. A sense of fear rose in Du Bianqing's heart at the thought that he couldn't see Yi Xing, but Yi Xing could see him clearly. Although Du Bianqing felt that his spear had pierced Yi Xing, he couldn't see Yi Xing's figure and didn't dare to attack blindly. He immediately retracted his spear and took a defensive stance. He circulated his celestial essence to his ears and listened to the sounds around him to determine Yi Xing's location. Du Bianqing's attack speed was extremely fast. After Yi Xing was stabbed by Du Bianqing's spear, Zichuanjian fell to the ground. At this moment, Yi Xing retreated to the side. He didn't counterattack Du Bianqing at all. Instead, he looked shocked. He felt a sudden surge of power coming from the black hole astrology and fusing into his mind. Yi Xing immediately scanned his mind with his superbrain and a shocking scene appeared. Chapter 201. In Yi Xing's mind. The red flame that symbolized destiny suddenly changed. It went from 2 flames to 3 flames. In the time it took for Yi Xing to snap his fingers in shock, the number of flames increased from 3 to 4. This meant that Yi Xing's destiny had increased from a 2-star red life to a 3-star red life, and then to a 4-star red life. What was destiny? Destiny was preordained by the heavens. Since it was destined, how could it be changed? Regardless of whether it was the martial arts manuals Yi Xing had read or the knowledge he had learned, destiny was something that could not be changed. However, at this moment, his martial arts knowledge was shattered once again. Yixing was completely shocked. In the blink of an eye, another flame appeared, and now there were 5 flames. Yixing's destiny was still increasing. The cause of this was some kind of power transmitted from the black hole astrology. According to the law of conservation of energy, Yixing immediately realized that the power transmitted from the black hole astrology had to have a source. It couldn't have been created out of thin air. Yixing's gaze immediately turned to Zichuanjian's corpse. The superbrain scanned Zichuanjian's head. Just as Yixing had expected, the orange flame that symbolized destiny in Zichuanjian's mind was gradually shrinking. The black hole astrology had actually devoured the destiny in Zichuanjian's mind and absorbed it into its own, causing its own destiny to increase. Devouring other people's destinies? The black hole astrology actually has such a heaven-defying effect? Yixing thought to himself in shock. Yixing had discovered 3 effects of the black hole astrology so far. The first was to create a world of darkness where the opponent would be blind. The second was to merge with the darkness and turn it into one's sense of touch, allowing one to sense everything in the darkness. The third was to devour other people's destinies to increase one's own destiny. These 3 effects didn't increase Yixing's attack power, but each of them was heaven-defying. In Yixing's opinion, the black hole astrology's effect was more valuable than any other astrology that could increase attack power. Although the black hole astrology didn't directly increase his attack power, it was enough for Yixing to defeat enemies who were stronger than him. Moreover, it could also increase his destiny. Such an ability was simply overpowered. Yixing watched, as his heavens will continue to rise. He was overjoyed and excited. Destiny had always been his shortcoming. Fortunately, he had the support of his powerful astrology, which prevented him from reaching a bottleneck in the astral tempering realm. However, the star-quenching realm was the first realm of cultivation. It was the stage of laying the foundation and the beginning of martial arts. Yixing could cultivate in the star-quenching realm unimpeded by astrology. But what about the star vortex realm and the star gang realm? What about the astral reaching realm and star sea realm? If his destiny was too low, there would be a day when Yixing would reach a bottleneck on the path of martial arts. But now the black hole astrology could devour destiny, so this worry was completely gone. Because the black hole astral projection was constantly devouring Zichuanjian's destiny, the red fireball in Yixing's mind was constantly expanding. More and more flames were added to the fireball. It didn't take long for Yixing's heaven's will to reach the 9 stars' crimson fate. His crimson ball of fire burned with 9 flames. This was the limit of a mortal fate. As more and more destiny was devoured by the black hole astrology, the red ball of fire in Yixing's mind underwent a qualitative change. The 9 flames gathered together and continued to compress. Soon, it became a single flame, which was 1/9 of its original size. Although the ball of fire had shrunk, its color had changed from red to orange. Yixing's destiny had improved by leaps and bounds, evolving from a red life to an orange life. In other words, he had evolved from an ordinary mortal life to a martial saint destiny. After reaching the martial saint destiny, the orange ball of fire continued to grow bigger and bigger. Yixing's destiny continued to increase. 2-star orange life. 3-star orange life. Eventually, 6 flames burned on the orange ball of fire, which meant that Yixing's destiny was a 6-star orange life. At this point, the orange flame in Zichuanjian's mind had completely disappeared, leaving not a trace behind. Under the devouring of Yixing's black hole astrology, all of Zichuanjian's destiny had been transferred to Yixing's destiny, causing Yixing's destiny to reach the 6-star martial saint destiny. A 2-star destiny had become a 6-star martial saint destiny. Who would believe such a thing if it were to spread out? No one would dare to imagine such a thing. If Yixing hadn't experienced it himself, he wouldn't have believed that his destiny could still increase. Moreover, it had increased by so much in such a short period of time. A 6-star orange life was already the peak of a mid-level martial saint's destiny. Whether it was in the falling star sect or the Dongfu sect, a 6-star orange life was considered to be above average. Yixing's gaze shifted to Du Bianqing and the corner of his mouth curled up. Du Bianqing had a 9-star orange life. If he absorbed Du Bianqing's destiny, then his destiny would also reach the 9-star orange life. A 9-star orange life was already a top talent in the falling star sect. If an enlightened being heaven's destiny didn't appear, then a 9-star orange life would be a top talent. As for an enlightened being heaven's destiny, it would be hard for a single one to appear in the falling star sect in several decades. Most of the time, a 9-star orange life would be the #1 genius. Du Bianqing clearly didn't know that Yi Xing's astrology had the ability to devour heaven's wills. He had already considered Du Bianqing as his prey. Because Yi Xing didn't move, Du Bianqing couldn't hear Yi Xing's location. All he could feel was silence. The silence in this world of darkness was extremely uncomfortable. Du Bianqing tried his best to control his emotions, but he couldn't help but feel anxious. Yi Xing, if you have the guts, then fight me with real swords and spears. What kind of man are you to be hiding? Du Bianqing finally lost his patience after waiting for a while and seeing no movement from Yi Xing. Not far away, the other 3 inner disciples exchanged glances. They weren't affected by the black hole astrology and could clearly see Yi Xing and Du Bianqing. Yi Xing clearly wasn't hiding and was just 100 meters to the left of Du Bianqing. Why did Du Bianqing say that Yi Xing was hiding? It was really puzzling. Recalling that Zi Chuanjian seemed to have been blinded in his battle with Yi Xing, the 3 of them immediately reacted. Could it be that Du Bianqing had also been blinded? As long as he fought with Yi Xing, he would be blinded. What kind of situation was this? What kind of martial art could have such an effect? If it really had such an effect, could it still be called a martial art? It was simply a demonic art. Senior Apprentice Brother Cheng. Yi Xing is on your left, about 270 steps away. The 2-star martial sage of the 3 shouted. The other 2 1-star martial sages were severely injured. Although the 2-star martial sage's injuries were not light, they were not life-threatening. He still had the strength to shout. About 270 steps to your left? Du Bianqing didn't move at all. In this pitch-black world of darkness, there was no sense of direction or distance. There was a 90-degree range between the front and the left. Since he couldn't see the target, Du Bianqing couldn't determine the specific direction of Yi Xing. Moreover, even if he knew the specific direction, Du Bianqing couldn't pinpoint the exact distance of 270 steps. If he took 270 steps step by step, it would be too late. Du Bianqing still held the purple feather spear in his hand, maintaining a defensive posture and vigilance. At this moment, it should be better to retreat from this dark space, but Du Bianqing didn't dare to act rashly. He didn't know how far he had to retreat before he could leave this dark space. Secondly, Yi Xing's arrow could attack at any time. He had to defend with all his strength. If he relaxed his mind, he might face Yi Xing's arrow attack. In the distance, Yi Xing took out the spiritual pattern bow and the blue sandalwood arrow. He put the arrow on the bow and pointed it at Du Bianqing. Senior Brother Cheng, be careful. Yi Xing is pointing his arrow at you. The 2-star martial saint hurriedly shouted. Zi Chuanjian and Du Bianqing were both 3-star martial saints, especially Du Bianqing, whose strength was no less than a 4-star martial saint. Something happened when he went to kill Yi Xing. Although the 2-star martial saint shouted happily, he didn't dare to rush up to deal with Yi Xing. Moreover, he was seriously injured now. If he rushed up, he would definitely die. He couldn't block Yi Xing's arrow at all. Du Bianqing received the warning and became more vigilant. He ran his star essence to his ears and listened to every movement in all directions. At the same time he shouted, "What are you waiting for? Call for help." Hearing this, the 2-star martial saints and the 2 1-star martial saints fired signal flares into the sky. 3 light beams shot up into the sky and exploded thousands of meters high in the sky, turning into 3 sunflowers. Yi Xing didn't change his target to shoot the other 3 martial saints. Yi Xing still didn't understand the dark world effect of the black hole astrology. He didn't know if others would attack him and enter the dark world, or if he attacked others, others would enter the dark world. If he attacked the other 3 martial saints and caused Du Bianqing to leave the dark world, it would be terrible. He would be in fatal danger. Yi Xing didn't rush to shoot the arrow. His shoulder was still bleeding. Every time he drew the bow, the injury on his shoulder would be strained. Therefore, Yi Xing wanted to reduce the number of times he drew the bow as much as possible. It would be best to kill Du Bianqing with 1 arrow. In that case, Yi Xing would raise the power of this arrow to the highest level before shooting it. Sagittarius astrology. Yi Xing's heart skipped a beat. In an instant, the bow and arrow rushed out from the space between his eyebrows and turned into a huge bow and arrow above Yi Xing. The The black hole astrology couldn't increase Yixing's attack power, but the Sagittarius astrology could increase the attack power of Yixing's arrow. In the dark world, Du Bianqing could only see the dark vortex above Yixing. Nothing else could be seen, not even the huge bow above Yixing. However, the other three martial saints weren't shrouded in the dark world and could see everything clearly. Above Yixing, there was not only a huge blurry dark star, but also a huge bow and arrow. When the bow and arrow appeared, Yixing's aura suddenly increased by several times, especially the bow and arrow in Yixing's hand. It revealed a terrifying aura. How is this possible? Two kinds of astrology? A bow and arrow? What kind of astrology is this? The three martial saints' expressions changed and they exclaimed at the same time. Chapter 202. Whoosh. The arrow containing the power of 18 stacked forces and Sagittarius constellation shot out in an instant. The void was torn apart at this moment. Du Bianqing's expression changed. He immediately felt a terrifying murderous intent surging toward him, trying to drag him into the abyss of death. The arrow pierced through the air faster than the sound. It was impossible for Du Bianqing to determine the arrow's location through the sound. At this moment, the only thing Du Bianqing could rely on was his intuition. The stronger a martial artist was, the more sensitive their intuition was. Du Bianqing could roughly determine the direction of the arrow from the murderous intent he felt. The purple feather spear in his hand instantly shone brightly. Spear lifting mountains. In an instant, the purple feather spear trembled. This was a defensive move that could deflect even the attack of a 4-star martial saint. Du Bian City's senses were indeed very sensitive. His spear actually managed to hit the arrow that was flying towards him. Unfortunately, Du Bianqing couldn't accurately determine the arrow's attack trajectory. Although he deflected the arrow, it only grazed the tail of the arrow. The arrow wasn't deflected by the spear. Instead, the tail of the arrow moved up and the arrowhead suddenly moved down. The arrow should have been aimed at Du Bianqing's heart, but it moved down a few inches and hit Du Bianqing's stomach. Du Bianqing used the power of Sagittarius constellation. His star power was extremely vigorous. Celestial essence covered his body and laid down layers of defense. However, Yixing's arrow was too powerful. Not only did it contain the power of 18 stacked forces, but it also contained the power of Sagittarius constellation. Especially the power of Sagittarius constellation, which made the arrow contain a terrifying murderous intent and lethality. Rip. Du Bianqing's celestial essence defense was instantly penetrated by the arrow. The arrow shot into his stomach more than a foot deep. Du Bianqing screamed. He covered his stomach with his hand and retreated a few steps before stabilizing his body. However, the power contained in the arrow didn't just cut his flesh. It also caused great destruction in a large area, causing serious damage to Du Bianqing. Senior brother Cheng. The expressions of the other three martial sages changed drastically. Even Du Bian City had been seriously injured by Yixing. This made them reveal a look of horror in their eyes as they exclaimed at the same time. Yixing pulled open the spirit pattern bow once, and the wound on his shoulder opened up even more, causing the blood to flow even faster. However, he still immediately took out a second blue sandalwood arrow and quickly shot it out. Whoosh! The arrow pierced through the air. This time, Du Bianqing was heavily injured and was unable to block the arrow. The arrow pierced through his throat. Blood immediately spurted out from Du Bianqing's throat. His eyes were filled with horror and disbelief. He fell backward and died instantly. As the #1 inner disciple of the Dongfu sect and the #2 genius of the Dongfu sect, Du Bianqing had a glorious reputation in the Dongfu sect. He had never imagined that he would die at the hands of a martial saint who had just broken through to the star vortex realm. Even when he died, he still couldn't believe this fact. The expressions of the other three martial sages completely turned into horror. Even Du Bian City had been killed by Yixing. How could they not be scared out of their wits? Even though Yixing's shoulder was also bleeding, and it was obvious that his injury was not light, the three martial sages regarded Yixing as a venomous snake and ferocious tiger. They were full of fear. Whoosh! The 2-star martial saint immediately turned and ran, leaving the other two severely injured 1-star martial saints behind. As for the two 1-star martial saints, their injuries were too severe. Although they had been treated for 2 hours and their lives had been saved, it was still difficult for them to move. Seeing that the 2-star martial saints had abandoned them, their faces turned ashen. They supported each other and slowly retreated. Although he didn't know if the signal flare released by the 3 martial saints would attract more experts of the Dongfu sect, Yixing couldn't let them leave alive. Enduring the pain in his shoulder, Yixing instantly took out 3 blue sandalwood arrows, knocked them on the bow, and released the 3 arrows together. Whoosh! 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 Whether it was the 2-star martial saints or the 2 1-star martial saints, not only were they seriously injured, but they were also fleeing at the moment. How could they avoid the arrows shot by Yixing when he used the Sagittarius constellation? The 3 arrows accurately shot into the backs of the 3 martial saints, piercing through their hearts from the back. All of them died instantly. Dubian City and the other martial saints, like Zichuanyu and the other 2, were all killed by Yixing. So far, 10 inner disciples of the Dongfu sect had been killed by Yixing. Dubian City was the #1 inner disciple of the Dongfu sect, and Yixing was only a half-step martial saint and was only the #1 outer disciple of the Falling Star sect. Before and after becoming a martial saint, he had killed 5 inner disciples of the Dongfu sect. Even Du Bian City, who had once defeated a 4-star martial saint, was killed by Yixing. No one would believe such a record. It was too shocking and beyond common sense. After killing the 3 inner disciples of the Dongfu sect, Yixing heaved a sigh of relief and put away the spiritual inscription bow in his storage ring. At this moment, the fire of destiny in Yixing's mind began to grow again, from 6 to 7 flames, and it was still growing. In the end, the flames grew to 9. 9 orange flames represented a 9-star orange fate. This was the fate of a peak martial saint, 1 star higher than Xianxia's 8-star orange fate. Yixing scanned the minds of Dubian City and the other inner disciples and found that the fire of destiny in their minds had indeed disappeared. All of it had been devoured by the black hole constellation and turned into his own fate. However, the level of Yixing's fate didn't depend on the number of fates devoured by the black hole constellation, but on the highest number of fates devoured. The highest number of fates devoured by the black hole constellation was Dubian City's 9-star orange fate. Therefore, Yixing's fate was also a 9-star orange fate. In terms of fate, Yixing would be a first-rate genius when he returned to the Falling Star sect. After putting the black hole constellation back into his forehead space, Yixing immediately consumed a top-grade medicinal herb with healing properties. He also squeezed another top-grade medicinal herb into juice and dripped it on the wound on his shoulder. After doing all this, Yixing moved the corpses of the Dongfu sect's inner disciples to the valley and collected their storage rings and spiritual weapons. These were all Yixing's spoils of war. Of course, among the 5 outer disciples of the Blood Ghost sect, Gu Yuyang also had a storage ring, so Yixing naturally collected it as well. Among the spiritual weapons, Yixing's favorite was the purple feather spear. He loved it so much that he couldn't bear to part with it. This lower-grade spiritual weapon was clearly stronger than any other lower-grade spiritual weapon. With the purple feather spear in hand, Yixing had the idea of cultivating his spear skills. Although his archery skills were very good, if he lost his bow and arrow, his strength would be greatly reduced. The bow and arrow should be used as a trump card. Most of the time, one should rely on one's own strength to fight. Therefore, one's own strength was also very important. If he was strong enough, he wouldn't have been stabbed by Du Bian City's spear today. Yixing's strength wasn't strong, mainly because he had just broken through to the martial saint realm and hadn't cultivated any spiritual level martial arts. If he had, with his talent in martial arts, even if he wasn't as strong as Du Bian City, he should be able to protect himself. Don't waste this good spear. After I become an inner disciple of the I must choose a good spiritual spear technique to learn. Yixing thought to himself as he collected all the spoils of war. Then, Yixing began to repair the formation. Although the coiling snake formation was broken by Du Bian City, he had only damaged a small part of the formation's foundation. In just a quarter of an hour, Yixing had completely repaired the damaged formation's foundation. The coiling snake formation once again enveloped the entire valley. Yixing came to the bottom of the valley again. He had only consumed about half of the star crystal spiritual milk to break through to the star vortex realm. Including the star crystal spiritual milk that Chu Jingyue had absorbed, Yixing had absorbed about a third of it, so there was still about a third left. The star crystal spiritual milk was the purest form of star power and the best treasure to improve one's cultivation. Since there was still some left, Yixing certainly wouldn't miss it. He would only stop after absorbing all of it. Yixing sat down cross-legged beside the star crystal spiritual milk and soon calmed down. Unaffected by the previous battle, he began to cultivate the pure Yuan technique. Yixing was surprised to find that after becoming a martial sage, the speed at which he absorbed the star crystal spiritual milk was much faster than when he was a half-step martial sage. It was more than 10 times faster. The star crystal spiritual milk in the pool almost turned into a large white airflow and was directly absorbed by Yixing into the star vortex in Yixing's dantian. This speed was simply too fast. While Yixing was surprised, he was also pleasantly surprised. The great increase in the speed at which he absorbed the star crystal spiritual milk meant that Yixing's cultivation speed had also become faster. Even if there was no star crystal spiritual milk to absorb, Yixing's cultivation speed in the star vortex realm would not be slow. Yixing scanned his body with his superbrain and immediately discovered the reason why his cultivation speed had become faster. First, it was because his destiny had improved, which made his cultivation smoother. Of course, this was not the main reason. The improvement of his destiny alone was not enough to increase his cultivation speed to such an extent. The second reason, which was also the main reason, was that Yixing's black hole star vortex had a great effect on absorbing star power. It was more like devouring than absorbing. The black hole star vortex forcibly devoured the star power nearby. It would be strange if the absorption speed was not fast. Under the devouring of the black hole star vortex, the star crystal spiritual milk in the pool was decreasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Yixing's cultivation was also increasing rapidly, and he was moving towards the second level of the star vortex realm. Chapter 203.Y Yixing's cultivation was already at the peak of the first level of the celestial vortex realm. As he continued to cultivate, it didn't take long for him to reach the critical point of the first level of the celestial vortex realm. Yixing felt that his whole body was filled with pure Yuan celestial essence. His body felt like it was about to burst open. He had reached his limit. At this time, Yixing continued to absorb the star crystal spiritual milk. He could no longer improve his celestial essence. Instead, he integrated it all into the black hole star vortex, making the star force in the black hole star vortex stronger and stronger. Finally, at a certain moment, the black hole star vortex absorbed the star force to a certain limit. A change occurred and it directly expanded. With the expansion of the black hole star vortex, Yixing felt that the capacity of his body had increased a lot. The feeling of his body being filled with celestial essence instantly disappeared. Instead, he felt that the celestial essence in his body was somewhat lacking. Of course, Yixing's celestial essence didn't change. What changed was the capacity of his body. For example, a liter of water could be filled to the brim in a 1-liter container. However, if a liter of water was placed in a 10-liter container, it would only fill 1/10 of the container, which seemed very little. The cultivation of the celestial vortex realm was the process of improving the star vortex. As the star vortex expanded, Yixing's cultivation reached the second level of the celestial vortex realm and became a 2-star martial sage. Of course, he could accommodate more celestial essence. Moreover, with the improvement of his cultivation, the quality of his celestial essence also had a qualitative breakthrough. The same amount of celestial essence, in terms of power, was much more powerful than when he was a 1-star martial sage. There was still a small part of the star crystal spiritual milk in the pool. Yixing continued to cultivate the pure Yuan technique and constantly absorbed it. Yixing's cultivation speed was too fast. In less than a quarter of an hour, he had absorbed all the star crystal spiritual milk in the pool. His cultivation had already consolidated to the mid-stage of the second level of the celestial vortex realm. Once the star crystal spiritual essence was used up, Yixing stopped cultivating. Although his cultivation speed was very fast, without the star crystal spiritual essence, it was impossible for him to break through one level in a short period of time, so he was not in a hurry. Yixing stood up with an excited smile on his face. He had just broken through the celestial vortex realm and became a martial sage. Then, his cultivation broke through again, becoming a 2-star martial sage. How could Yixing not be happy? He had just become a martial sage, yet he had already broken through to become a 2-star martial sage. Yixing had never heard of such a fast cultivation speed. Even a Taoist or heavenly mandate genius would need several months or even half a year to break through to the next realm in the celestial vortex realm. Xianxia was an 8-star martial saint and had broken through to the celestial vortex realm before the age of 17. However, when he entered the clear cloud ancient land at the age of 24, he was only at the 7th level of the celestial vortex realm. On average, he broke through 1 level per year. From this, one could see how fast Yixing had become a 1-star martial sage and a 2-star martial sage on the same day. Originally, even if all the star crystal spiritual essence was absorbed by Yixing, it would still be impossible for his cultivation to break through continuously. The reason why his cultivation could still break through to the 2nd level of the celestial vortex realm even after Jianghu had absorbed 1/3 of the star crystal spiritual essence was because of his black hole astrology. During the period when the black hole astrology was awakened, it had devoured too much astral energy, causing Yixing's cultivation to reach the peak of the 1st level of the celestial vortex realm. Moreover, the black hole astrology had also raised Yixing's heavenly mandate to a 9-star orange fate. There would be no bottleneck before he reached the 9th level of the celestial vortex realm. As a result, Yixing had absorbed a little more star crystal spiritual essence and naturally broke through to the 2nd level of the celestial vortex realm. Yixing! A loud voice came from outside the canyon. Yixing was delighted to hear that it was his master, Xianhu's voice. Although he did not know that Du Bianqing was the #1 inner disciple of the Dongfu sect, he could tell from Du Bianqing's strength that he was definitely an important figure. After killing Du Bianqing, Yixing had been worried that the Dongfu sect would send more powerful martial artists and he would not be able to resist them. Now that Xianhu was here, he could finally breathe a sigh of relief. In fact, Yixing's worries were not unfounded. Du Bianqing was a genius disciple who was more valued by the Dongfu sect than Zichuanyu. Of course, his body was also engraved with a formation that could detect life auras. The formation master of the Dongfu sect was already aware of Du Bianqing's death. In one day, 2 of the sect's most valued disciples had died, which shocked and angered him. Then, the formation master of the Dongfu sect passed the news to enlightened Master Du Bianying through the communication bead. The communication bead was a bead engraved with a sound transmission formation that could communicate with each other. However, not everyone could use the communication bead. Only enlightened masters who had transformed their celestial essence into astral energy could use it. The communication bead was useless in the hands of martial artists below the enlightened master level. Du Bianying was Du Bianqing's father and the enlightened master who was in charge of investigating Zichuanyu's death. In the end, before Zichuanyu's death could be found, his genius son had already died. Du Bianying was furious when he heard about Du Bianqing's death. He immediately brought several martial saints with him and charged towards the Kunyan mountain range. Yixing immediately came out of the canyon. After exiting the coiling snake array, he saw Xianhu on the back of the purple flame eagle. Jianghu followed Yixing's advice and reported the news to Xianhu when they arrived at Zishan County. Xianhu knew that Yixing had found a star crystal lode. This was a big news and he immediately rushed to the Kunyan mountain range. The purple flame eagle was faster than the black feather eagle. Before Jianghu returned to the Xianhu had already arrived at the Kunyan mountain range. Master! Yixing quickly stepped forward to greet him. Xianhu was looking at the snake coiling array with a surprised expression. He did not pay much attention to Yixing. This grade 2 snake coiling array was arranged by you? Yixing nodded. Yes. The surprise in Xianhu's eyes deepened as he looked at Yixing. You have such a heaven-defying talent in array formations? Xianhu knew about Yixing's deeds in the Falling Star sect. He knew that Yixing would go to the Array Source Valley every other day. However, the Array Source Valley was Gu Tianshang's territory, and Xianhu could not find out what happened there. Xianhu had always thought that Yixing was working for Gu Tianshang in the Array Source Valley. Who would have thought that Yixing had learned array formations and had become a grade 2 array master in such a short time? Xianhu looked at Yixing. In the blink of an eye, he was shocked again. You're already a 2-star martial saint? Yixing nodded again. Xianhu was completely shocked. He had always thought that Yixing would have a bright future. Because of Yixing's performance, his opinion of Yixing had improved again and again. However, he now realized that he had underestimated Yixing. Jianghu had already told Xianhu about the situation here. Xianxia knew that Yi Xing had absorbed the star crystal spiritual essence to break through to the martial saint realm. However, Xianxia could tell from Chu Jingyue's description that the remaining star crystal spiritual essence was only enough for Yi Xing to break through to the star vortex realm. His cultivation might be consolidated to the late stage of the first layer, or even the peak, but it was impossible for him to break through to the second layer, which meant that it was impossible for him to become a 2-star martial saint. However, Yi Xing had already become a 2-star martial saint. Yi Xing knew that the increase in his cultivation was very shocking, and Xianxia was someone he trusted. Perhaps he could ask Xianxia for advice. Yi Xing said, "Master, the astrology I awakened is a bit special. When I awakened my astrology, my cultivation soared rapidly. The moment I broke through to the star vortex realm, my cultivation reached the peak of the first level. Therefore, I absorbed the remaining star crystal spiritual essence and broke through to the second level of the star vortex realm. Master, is there any astrology that can speed up my cultivation and improve my cultivation?" Xianxia shook his head and said, "What astrology did you awaken? Show me." Yi Xing immediately released the black hole astrology. He felt that his surroundings had turned into a world of darkness, and the darkness was like his sense of touch. He could clearly feel any movement in all directions. He could even feel a few ants crawling on the ground. However, Xianxia, who was in front of Yi Xing, did not feel anything strange. In his eyes, the outline of a huge dark star above Yi Xing's head was unreal. Other than that, he did not feel anything else. "This is your astrology, a dark star. I have never seen or heard of it before. This astrology can actually increase cultivation. How strange." Xianxia observed Yi Xing's astrology for a while and sighed. This time, it was Yi Xing's turn to be surprised. "Master, you can see me?" Xianxia said. "Of course I can. Did you think you were invisible?" Yi Xing said, "That's not right. When I was fighting with someone just now, I used the black hole astrology. My opponent could not see me. Master, why don't you try attacking me?" "Oh." Xianxia's expression changed. "Let me try." Then, he lightly struck out with his palm. Chapter 204. Who, although it was a light palm, a strong wind blew, and the terrifying power was like an avalanche, slapping towards Yi Xing. Yi Xing scanned the trajectory of Xianxia's attack, but the latter's attack was too fierce and too fast. Even if he knew, he could not dodge it in time. In an instant, Yi Xing was sent flying by a terrifying force. However, Xianxia's palm strike was skillfully executed. Even though Yi Xing was sent flying by the force of the palm strike, he was completely unharmed. "Master, can you still see me?" Yi Xing flew back dozens of meters and asked immediately after landing. On the back of the purple flame eagle, Xianxia nodded. "I can see you." Yi Xing's eyes lit up, and he instantly reacted. Since other people's attacks were not affected by the black hole astrology, it must be when he attacked others that others would be affected. Yi Xing raised his hand, and the spirit inscription bow and blue sandalwood arrow suddenly appeared in his hands. He knocked an arrow on the bow and pointed it at Xianxia. A sharp aura locked onto Xianxia. "Master, what now?" Yi Xing asked. In an instant, Xianxia's perception changed. Suddenly, the sky seemed to be covered by a pitch-black curtain. The whole world turned into darkness, and he couldn't even see his own fingers in front of him. The surrounding dark world suddenly reminded Xianxia of the previous dark world, and Yi Xing had just broken through to the martial saint realm and awakened his astrology. Obviously, there must be a connection between the two. Perhaps it was because of Yi Xing's astrology awakening that the world turned dark. Yi Xing immediately channeled his celestial essence into his eyes, raising his eyesight to the limit. The eyesight of a peak martial saint was amazing, and he could see through the darkness. The surrounding scene was vaguely imprinted in his eyes, and even Yi Xing could see a hazy figure in the distance. Although the effect of Yi Xing's black hole astrology was heaven-defying, his own cultivation was still too low. He was only at the second level of the celestial vortex realm, a full 7 levels below Xianxia. Even the black hole astrology could not bridge the gap of 7 levels. Therefore, Xianxia pushed his vision to the limit and vaguely saw through the darkness caused by the black hole astrology. Immediately, a layer of azure light appeared in Xianxu's eyes. Using the azure cloud eye, his eyesight instantly increased by more than 10 times. The surrounding darkness could no longer obstruct Xianxu's eyes, and he could see everything clearly. Xianxu said, "Your astrology is indeed miraculous. It really did bring me into a world of darkness. Everything around me was pitch black." Obviously, the turning of the heavens and earth into darkness was related to the awakening of your astrology. However, the power of the astrology is closely related to the cultivation level of a martial artist. Although your astrology is powerful, your cultivation level is still too far from mine. Although the world of darkness can affect me, the effect is not very big. I can only vaguely see it if I push my eyesight to the limit, and if I use my green eyes, I can see even more clearly. As he spoke, Xianxu's tone changed. "And, because your cultivation level is too far away from mine, even if my astrology is not as good as yours, it is enough to break through the effects of your astrology." After saying this, the azure light in Xianxu's eyes retreated, and his eyesight returned to normal. His surroundings once again turned into darkness, but suddenly, a flaming star drilled out from the space between his eyebrows and rose into the sky. This was Xianxu's astrology, a star of the fire attribute, and the flames were extremely fierce. Once the flaming star appeared, in an instant, the scorching light dispelled the darkness of the black hole astrology, illuminating the surroundings as if it was daytime. This was different from the green eyes seeing through the darkness, but the flaming star dispelled the darkness. When Xianxu used his green eyes to see the surroundings clearly, the darkness still existed, and Yixing could still feel everything in all directions through the darkness. However, once Xianxu's flame astral aspect was unleashed, the darkness disappeared, and Yixing also lost his sense of touch. Yixing tested the effects of the black hole astrology, and found that it would only appear when he attacked others. He then stored the black hole astrology into the space between his eyebrows. Although Xianxu had completely broken through his astrology, Yixing was not the least bit unhappy. He was in the second stage of the celestial vortex realm, while Xianxu was in the 9th stage. There was a difference of 7 stages between their cultivation levels. Not to mention the black hole astrology, even if the black hole astrology and the Sagittarius constellation were added together, it would still be impossible to make up for the difference of 7 stages. Being completely broken by Xianxu was a matter of course. It was not that Yixing's astrology was not strong enough, but that his cultivation level was too low compared to Xianxu's. Xianxu also stored the flaming star into the space between his eyebrows, and continued, "Yixing, there is a principle that you should know: the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. If a person is too outstanding, there will be more disasters. Because, in this world, there are too many people who are jealous and envious of you. Your astrology is extraordinary, and very special. I'm afraid it is not inferior to the constellation astrology, which is known as the strongest astrology. If people know about it, it is inevitable that there will be experts who will have evil intentions towards you. Therefore, your astrology must not be revealed to anyone. Unless absolutely necessary, do not use it. Once you use it, do not leave anyone alive to prevent the other party from revealing your secret." Yixing nodded. This disciple understands. Of course, he knew that the black hole astrology was extraordinary. Because he trusted Xianxu, Yixing spoke bluntly to him. To other people, Yixing would not reveal the problem of his astrology. Furthermore, the black hole astrology's ability to devour heaven's will was too abnormal. With this ability, in theory, as long as there was a genius with a high heaven's will in the world, then Yixing would have the hope of obtaining that high heaven's will. This was an ability that could deprive others of their heaven's will. It could deprive all the geniuses of their heaven's will for their own use. It was truly heaven-defying. This was something that even Xianxu did not dare to say. Yixing asked again, "Master, is it possible for a martial artist to have 2 astrology? The same person having 2 astrology? This is unheard of." Xianxu smiled faintly. He originally wanted to say that it was unheard of, but suddenly realized that Yixing's question was a bit strange. Everything was fine. Why would Yixing ask such a question? Could it be? Xianxu immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Even though he felt that it was impossible to have 2 astrology, he still rationally realized that since Yixing asked such a question, It was very likely that he had encountered such a situation. Seeing the change in Xianxia's expression, Yixing knew that the former had already guessed it. With a thought, Yixing moved the Sagittarius constellation out from between his eyebrows. In an instant, a bow and arrow floated in the air above Yixing. This was an incomparably huge bow and arrow, formed by the convergence of countless stars. It looked incomparably magnificent and shocking. Sagittarius constellation. You really have two astrology. Xianxia could no longer remain calm as he cried out in surprise. Yixing's body had produced too many miracles, again and again shocking Xianxia. Some things that were slightly difficult to accept, Xianxia was already used to Yixing. However, this time, Xianxia was still deeply shocked. Firstly, Yixing really had two astrology, which broke the common sense of martial arts. Secondly, Yixing's other astrology was actually a constellation astrology, and it was the strongest astrology for archery martial artists, Sagittarius constellation. Xianxia himself was an archery martial artist, and his archery skills were very high. The Sagittarius constellation was the ultimate desire of archery martial artists. To an archery martial artist, possessing the Sagittarius constellation was the best condition to learn archery. Xianxia looked at Yixing and exclaimed, "Yixing, you will definitely become an archery expert in the future. You will definitely be an influential figure in the star continent. No, you will even be the overlord of the star continent." Recalling that Yixing had two astrology, as well as a black hole astrology that did not increase attack power but had an incomparably heaven-defying supportive effect, Xianxia immediately changed his tone. Among the martial artists of the star continent, kings stood at the peak. What kind of existence was the overlord of the star continent? Dominating among kings, wouldn't that be the king of kings? Would Yixing become such an existence? In Xianxia's opinion, it was possible. The constellation astrology was already the strongest astrology in the legends. It was unknown how many years it would take for one to appear in the star continent. As long as it matured, the martial artist with the constellation astrology was already the strongest existence. As for the double astrology, that had not even appeared in the legends. A single astrology was already so abnormal. With two super strong astrology in one person's body, as long as there was enough time to grow, wouldn't he become the king of kings in the future? Absolutely. Xianxia's confidence at this moment was incomparably firm. Please brothers, please give me 10 monthly votes. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.